It's 11:59 at Gun Owners Radio, and this is the Pen Patriot, music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, and another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind American lines, this is your song.
Gun Owners Radio, everybody. We make activism easy. Thank you so much for joining us. It is June 15th, or Father's Day. Actually, this year, for the first time, and I can't remember how long, it is Father's Day and my father's birthday. So happy birthday, Dad. You're not going to see this. You're actually on a cruise to Alaska. But everybody else, welcome, Gun Owners Radio. So glad you could join us. Well, why do we do Gun Owners Radio? Well, that's a really good question. We want to make change happen. We want to see positive change happen when it comes to Second Amendment in our lifetime. So what can you do? Well, share our clips, listen every week, do all that good stuff, but especially subscribe. Subscribe, it's free, it's easy, and that way every time we have something to talk about or have some kind of clip to share with you, boom, you'll know immediately. So we need your help. Help us promote the channel. We're at like almost at 11,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to everybody that's subscribed, and we're going to continue to grow and make things happen, make good things happen. Now let's go to the show.
All right, guess what's on today's show? All kinds of fun. There's a gun show in town here in San Diego. We talked to John Petrolino, the Pen Patriot, and what is the San Diego Police Department up to, and much more. Lawsuits and news that you need to know. Gun Owners Radio comes to you from a studio at Discount Gun Mart. When was the last time you visited DGM? Well, come check them out today and check out their website at discountgunmart.com. While you're on the internet, go to our website as well, gunownersradio.com, and sign up to get our email so you know what's happening in the Second Amendment community.
All right, we've got some CGF sweepstakes. It is a Kel-Tec KS7, and you can find out more by going to cagunrights.org/KS.
There it is, California Gun Rights Foundation, fantastic organization. All you got to do is go there, make a donation, and you could win a KS7. KS7 is pretty cool. It's one of those guns. I don't really fall in love with guns.
It's a pretty fun one.
It's a pretty cool gun. What shotgun do you use? Do you have a shotgun?
A Winchester SXP pump
action.
Wow.
You know, I used to just give it to my nephew. I had a Winchester 1200. Which is, of course, a Winchester 12, then it turned into a 1200, then it turned into a 1300. I had a 1300 barrel on it, but that eventually turned into yours. Yeah, that was the lineage.
Yeah. When I first got that shotgun, I was just in the market for like a, pump action kind of home defense style shotgun. And I was looking at like, Remingtons and, some of the more popular ones like, Remington 870 or there's another one that everybody gets, something
Mossberg?
500. Yeah. 500,
That's
right?
what I got. I have a 26-year-old Mossberg 500.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And so when I was in the market, I think it was actually this Discount Gun Mart just happened to have a sale on the Winchester SXP. And I was like, well, that's really cheap. I'll try it. And I know it gets a lot of hate. People, say some of their SXPs have had issues with the action or whatever. But I have had absolutely no problems with that gun. And it's done very well for me in like defensive shotgun competitions.
The one thing, that 1200, I could rack that thing so quickly. The action was so smooth, so that would surprise me. Alicia, what do you have? What's your shotgun?
Well, I actually have all the ones that you guys talked about that you don't have. I have the Remington, the 870. Yeah. I have a Benelli as well as the a Mossberg 500 and a 590.
Wow. You're all shotgunned out. You're really full house.
You know what's funny is I don't even really enjoy shotgun all that much.
No?
No. It's not my favorite.
I kind of dig it. I've kind of turned into a shotgun guy.
Yeah. I love shotgun.
I mean, I can do it. I prefer handgun.
How about this week? Yeah. Was this like the craziest news week ever?
So much drama.
There was a lot happening.
There was a lot happening. There was so much happening. There was stuff like riots. There was,
peaceful protest.
Peaceful, yes. Yeah, mostly peaceful protest. David Hogg got ousted. He's no longer on the, we talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago. We kind of knew that it was happening, that happened. So much went on. So much went on. The National Guard And then it feels like this happened a month ago because so much has happened. But did you guys read about or did you keep up with the Elon versus Trump thing?
I keep up. No, I saw it. I didn't follow. I didn't read the details. So I'm curious to hear.
Ugly.
I'm excited to hear.
Really ugly.
What do you remember? What stuck out to you?
Well, the Twitter war was just so funny. And then the memes that came out of it, I saw a meme that said something like, the president of the United States and one of the richest man in the world, like quabbling in front of everybody. And it was just like some screenshots of some of their tweets back and forth. And I don't know, it's a funny time when two of the most powerful people in the nation are verbally, outwardly arguing on a social media platform instead of, going and sitting with a mediator and having an adult conversation with each other.
I was embarrassed for him. I couldn't sit there and read it.
Yeah, it was a little. I kind of like the fact that I like that things are so open these days. You know what I mean? Like everyone's just a human being now.
It does feel like a lot of government transparency. We get to see the inner workings of our president's mind whenever we want. Now, whether or not that's a good thing, who knows? But we get to be part of it if we want.
The lesson learned, Elon learned that in politics, you have no friends. There are no friends in politics. You have temporary allies. And I got to tell you, there were, I don't want to sound, but I could relate to parts of this. Basically, Elon said, hey, I have some ideas and I'm unhappy with Democrats. And they embraced him and they brought him in and they pretended to be his friend. They weren't his friend.
Right.
They just wanted his, influence and money. They brought him in and put their arms around him and said, we're going to take pictures. You're going to get to go to functions. And,
place where you belong.
Yeah, here you go. Mm-hmm. And we're going to give you little things to do. But then when it came down to it, they were like, we're not going to do everything you want us to do. In fact, we're going to do very few of the things you want us to do. And you're just going to have to accept that. And he thought he'd made friends and was actually making progress. And that's not what was happening. I can kind of relate. It's kind of what happened when I started San Diego County Gun Owners. That's kind of what happened with me and the local Republican Party. It kind of feels like the same thing. And maybe I'm projecting my experience onto him, but man, it looked familiar.
Well, no, I think that totally makes sense because I think, Elon's involvement in the government went from very, very little to, you have this prestigious position and all this power, but in reality, I think, it sounds like what ended up kind of creating the divide was Trump saying, well, actually, you don't have power, I have power, and I'm going to take this contract away or the mandate or whatever about the electric vehicles. So, yeah, it was interesting. I agree with Alicia. It was kind of embarrassing on behalf of, the country to see all of this happen. But I will say I wasn't surprised. I think we see that a lot of people who get close to Trump or who work with Trump end up kind of leaving in a big outrage kind of situation. We've seen a lot of folks close to the president, crash and burn.
Well, the reasons I read were, one, the bill, the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
That just didn't have the cuts that he'd hoped for that were the result of Doge. There was another one, the NASA, head of NASA pick was not the person that he wanted it to be.
Right.
What else was there? There were a couple others.
The EV mandate thing, I think, was a big one. Yeah. So I guess Trump tweeted something like, Elon knew I was going to take away the mandate for a long time, but when I actually did it, he went crazy. Crazy was in all caps. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
He went crazy.
And it was probably all those things. It was probably all that just leading up to, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were friends. There's no friends in politics. So they just did exactly what they were going to do, and that's how it was. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty crazy week. We're going to talk about a couple other things coming up. Senator Padilla was introduced to the pavement. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the riots that happened. Get a little outside of mainstream Second Amendment stuff, but it's political stuff, and it's California stuff, and I think it's important stuff, so we're going to talk about it. But first, what do we got, Alicia?
Next, we have our gun truth of the week.
Gun truth of the week. Okay, this week's gun truth is, first, it starts with a myth. The myth is a good guy with a gun never stops a bad gun actively, a good guy with a gun never stops a bad gun actively shooting at people. That's the myth. The truth is that an FBI report on 50 active shooter incidences in 2016 and 2017 found, first, in 10 incidences, citizens confronted the shooter. In 8 of those incidences, 1 or more citizens safely and successfully acted to end the shooting. In 4 of those incidences, citizens possessing valid firearms permits successfully stopped the shooter. And in 2 of those incidences, citizens exchanged gunfire with the shooter. In 2, the citizens held the shooter at gunpoint until law enforcement arrived. And in 1, a citizen possessing a valid firearms permit exchanged gunfire with the shooter, causing the shooter to flee to another scene and continue shooting. That's an FBI. That's from FBI data. That's not a some kind of right-wing pro Second Amendment source, and it's all recent. That was just a few years ago. So, like we said before, get a gun, get a permit, get training, and carry everywhere you possibly can. And that is your gun truth of the week. I don't think that's a big surprise.
Nope.
No.
I was honestly surprised by the myth, to be honest.
Same. I was like, do people still think that? Is that real life?
I think they think it enough. I think that it gets put out there by biased people enough that, yeah, it's still a myth.
Definitely.
And I think that people that are uneducated or never really been around firearms, I don't think that they can imagine that a civilian can stop some kind of horrific act.
That's a great point. I actually saw that. I'm in a bunch of different Facebook groups. Some of them are, about guns. Some of them are just like, general groups. But one of the groups I'm in, there was a conversation recently about teachers, and somebody was saying, something about arming teachers. And I think the post was, a very well-meaning teacher saying, hey, I'm scared that there could be an active shooting incident at my school, and I don't feel like I have the tools or the knowledge to do anything about it if it happens. And, my school's telling me to put all the kids under the desk and hide in the corner and turn the lights off. And that doesn't feel logical to me. And so the comments were all over the board, but some people, advocating for getting training and carrying a gun. And this wasn't a California school, so it was in a state where that is an option. But a lot of the comments in response to that suggestion were like, oh, now you want teachers to teach and be, Navy SEAL Team 6 or whatever. And I think so many people, like there were, I would say, probably 2 or 3 comments on that thread that were pro getting a gun and getting training, and probably 300 to 400 comment responses under that comment saying, this person's just going to accidentally kill a kid. They're not going to have the training to be accurate enough to actually stop the bad guy. You're going to have a handgun go up against a rifle, like all these types of comments. And, of course I'm in there like, here's a link to, Genius Som who had a handgun and fought, saved people's lives and whatever. But I do think that is very believed. I think people believe that, there's no way you could be accurate enough as a civilian. And even cops, I think sometimes cops give folks a bad name because the Uvalde disaster and other disasters where law enforcement didn't go in or didn't stop the bad guy quickly. And so people are like, well, if the cops can't do it, then civilians definitely can't do it. It's like, well, a lot of cops could have done it. Just the ones that showed up first didn't do it, but they could have, know. So I think it's an interesting point. We lose touch, I think, with what the other side believes to be true. And they have all the media backing up those beliefs. All the stories you hear in the headlines are, armed person stopped by a civilian, but this is rare. How lucky that the civilian didn't kill someone random on accident. We hear that rhetoric over and over. So I don't know. I guess it makes sense.
Time again. One of the things I think that is so good about training, even if you don't carry, even if you decide not to carry, if you get to a point of confidence through training with a firearm, I think that's very empowering. I know that I didn't realize how incompetent I was with my firearm until I started taking formal classes. I thought, well, I got this gun and I take it to the range and I pretty much know how to do it, whatever. But I also kind of handled it like I was afraid of it, and then you go through formal training and you see process and procedure and you get some reps in. It's not about hitting the target. It's about, that level of confidence with your firearm. And that level of confidence with your firearm is very empowering, so. All right. Well, there you go. How about we do some, why don't we do some Q's and A's? You have Q's, we have A's. I get all kinds of questions all the time. We get questions in the comment section on our videos. We get questions emailed to us. We get all kinds of questions. So what's our first question? Dakota, you want to do our first question?
Sure. Yeah, the question is, can I transport loaded magazines? So that's the first piece of it. And the answer is yes, you can transport loaded magazines. I think this question is referring to transporting in a vehicle. Yeah. Totally fine. You can have loaded magazines in your vehicle while you are transporting your gun to the range. Totally fine. And then the second part of this question is, what about being outside with an exposed magazine? So I think this question is more like, if you're leaving the range and you've got your mags in your hand, is that legal? Can you go put them in your car while they're exposed? And yeah, there's no laws against, carrying ammunition boxes, magazines, loaded magazines, loose rounds in your hands. Like you can have ammo and magazines exposed as much as you want. Where it could get tricky is if if you have magazines and loaded mags in your car and they're visible, they're exposed, then that could create some, concern if you were to get pulled over or something, because it's obvious, it's evident that you have, something that goes into a firearm. So could create a little bit of concern.
That's the thing. And the letter of the law is, you explained perfectly. But the best practice is, a
little bit of logic here goes a long way,
One of the other big ones is, can you have a magazine, a loaded magazine in the same container as your firearm? A lot of people think that you can't. Letter of the law is, there's no law banning that.
Yep,
but,
you totally can.
I think that it is a myth that is prevalent enough that there are probably enough law enforcement officers out there that would, be confused by it. So I tend to have two different containers.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people like, well, it's the law, whatever. Okay, do it. Letter of the law, but I don't really want to get into it with a cop. I just don't.
For sure. I think for me, because I do have my range bag is closed, there's no evidence of like ammunition or anything when I'm transporting my range bag to the range. I'm less worried about a cop even finding it or seeing it or getting into it, because, if I get pulled over, they're not going to be searching my car, right? So I think for me, like, I have a dedicated pocket for magazines just because that's how my range bag is set up. Those mags are loaded, and then I've got my, locked gun case with my pistols in it inside the range bag. So they're in the same container kind of, but the locked case is separate. So I think everybody kind of has their own preferences, but that's how I do it now because I have an SUV. Back when I had a car, the whole range bag just went in the trunk and the pistols were in pistol pouches. The pouches weren't locked. The range bag wasn't locked.
Way easier.
Just the whole range bag was in the trunk.
Well, there you go. So short answer is yes, you can carry loaded magazines. They just can't be in the gun. And there you go. Easy.
Probably smart to not have them be visible if you're going to be driving.
Yeah, I mean, is it legal? Can you have them on the front seat so everybody, the whole world can see? Yeah. Are you inviting questions, and are the people asking those questions wrong? Yeah, they're totally wrong. You know what I mean? They're totally wrong, and any police officer that gives you a hard time is totally wrong. But it's up to you to decide how you want to spend your Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
So there you go. We gave you the letter of the law. We gave you some best practices, and the rest is up to you. It's your, it's a free country. So What's the next question?
If I move to California with off-roster guns, can I sell them private sale through an FFL? If so, do I have to register them with the DOJ first?
Okay, that's a good question. Couple of levels to that question, right?
Yeah, there are a few levels, and it really all comes down to options. You've got a few choices here. So first choice is within 60 days of moving into the state, you can either register it, so that's paperwork that you fill out and submit to the Department of Justice in California and Sacramento, or you can sell them. So you could sell them to an FFL. You could sell them, via an FFL to somebody. But you can't wait more than 60 days, although the law says you won't get in trouble if you register them after. But if you were to get caught in that interim where you hadn't registered them and you were after 60 days, you could get in some legal trouble. So definitely, if you're moving to California, just get them registered within that 60 days or sell them within that 60 days.
Yeah, And the important part, a lot of people get confused about that safe handgun roster. All the safe handgun roster does is it prevents FFLs from selling, like most handguns now.
Yeah.
But that's all it does. It doesn't prevent you from owning a pistol that's not on the safe handgun roster. It doesn't prevent someone who owns it from selling it to somebody else. They can do a private party transfer. It really just applies to FFLs. So let's say you move from out of town. You move from Arizona, and you move into California. The expectation is what they want you to do. Okay, is they want, and say you have a pistol that's off roster, right? It's not on the safe handgun roster. Let's just say it's a Gen 5 Glock. So you move to California. They want you to register it as quickly as possible. They give you 60 days. And then if you want to sell it, you would sell it to, a private party through an FFL. You'd just have to go to the FFL and do the transfer because they got to do the background check and the 10-day wait and everything. And that's what you're expected to do. But the reality is you can own an off-roster pistol. You can move into California and take it with you. Eventually you are expected to register it, unfortunately. But there you go.
Yeah, and I think like regular handguns really is what we were talking about here. But also, if you want to think about kind of a broader picture, you're still not allowed to import assault weapons. The assault weapons ban is in effect, right? So you're still not allowed to bring those in, import them into the state, and then try to register them. So if you have a machine gun or something, it's not gonna fly.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, did you just talk about magazines?
Well, I haven't talked about magazines
yet. Talk about normal capacity
Mm-hmm.
magazines. So you got it. Let's say you have a Gen 5 Glock 19, okay, and you're going to take it into California. You have 15-round mags.
So technically, you can't import those mags into the state. So the law is a little confusing on this, and I think probably intentionally. But the importation of magazines, high-capacity magazines, is what they call them in California. Anything that holds more than 10 rounds, technically the importation of those magazines is illegal. So I think the kind of letter of the law way to play it safe is to sell your mags in whatever state that you are coming from, right? If Tennessee to California. Don't know why you'd be doing that. But if you were, if you're leaving Tennessee, sell your mags there, come to California with just your gun, no high capacity magazines, more than 10 rounds, and then get your regular 10-round mags when you're here. And then everything's legal. You have all the legal parts and pieces. Sometimes people ask about like, oh, do I have to change my, let's say, for example, from not having a magazine disconnect to having a magazine disconnect once I'm in California? Or do I have to add the safety because that's the only way you can buy it here in California? Nope. You don't have to make any modifications to bring your gun to California standards. You can have whatever gun it is that you have, regardless of the roster, regardless of the California standards for safety. Yeah. I don't even like saying that, but so you guys just think about making sure that whatever you're planning to do, that you've looked up the laws, because we didn't mention this, but we're not lawyers and the laws change all the time. Yeah. So keep an eye out, make sure you don't, watch this video in a year and say, oh, well, Gun Owners Radio told me I could do this, because things change all the time.
Things change all the time. If you're already typing away in the comments section, just remember, we don't agree with this either. Don't shoot the messenger. We're just telling you, hey, this is what we know the answer to be with the best knowledge that we have available to us. Doesn't mean we like it. We're, in fact, fighting against it. We'd like to remove many, if not all, these ridiculous gun laws. So don't shoot the messenger. Complain about California and Sacramento and these gun laws all you want, but we don't agree. We think they're horrible. So there you go. All right, your Q's and your A's. Appreciate everybody that asks us questions. We'll do our very best to answer and give you an accurate answer almost all the time.
Yeah, we do our best.
We do our very best. So there you go.
All right, this segment is our legal and legislative segment where we tell you what you need to know from the courts and from the legislators. Remember that we are not lawyers and nothing that we say is to be taken as legal advice. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer who has been helping people to fight those GVROs, gun violence restraining orders, and more. If you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
Okay, for our lawsuits and legal updates section, we're going to do something a little different this week. I wanted to bring on a friend of the show and a friend of mine, John Petrolino, the Pen Patriot. because we have a couple of things that we want to cover that he knows a whole lot about that I think you'll all find very, very interesting. No matter where you live in the country, there's some really cool stuff going on. John, how you doing, man?
I am doing great, Michael. I've got a very important message for the Patriots behind enemy lines. The chair
right.
is against the wall.
There you go.
The chair is against the wall. How the heck are you, Michael? How's
Good,
everyone
man.
doing over there on the left coast? I miss you.
Yeah, I know. We're on the other side of enemy lines, where you're on the other side of enemy lines. We're both behind enemy lines.
White meat.
Yeah, it's just that different fronts. So it's good to see you. Good to hear from you. We have some really cool stuff. I wanted to kick it off. I know you know about this case, and we talked about it a little bit on Gun Owners Radio, but there is an attorney in town named Robert Wright. And Robert Wright is an extremely accomplished attorney. We actually gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award a few years ago at Gun Prom because of in the 90s, he was an attorney who helped defend the industry from like these, everything's all your fault because you make guns lawsuits, right? So he's got this history of defending and protecting the gun industry. And then you got this lawsuit that just popped up where Mexico is suing Smith and Wesson. And they, of course, that got thrown out. The Supreme Court just threw that out. And this attorney, Robert Wright, wrote me a little blurb, which I just wanted to go over real quick. On June 5th, the U.S. Supreme Court rendered a favorable decision for Smith & Wesson and others, affirming the dismissal of the complaint brought by Mexico. The theory of the complaint was that the 7 defendant U.S. manufacturers failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent the trafficking of guns into Mexico by dealers. To the contrary, they aided and abetted illegal sales by dealers. Now, that term aided and abetted is a big part of this lawsuit. So that's the context that he each wanted to, recap the context that Mexico is suing Smith & Wesson, claiming that Smith & Wesson and some other manufacturers aided and abetted some of these illegal gun sales and trafficking into Mexico. 2 holdings are of particular interest. First one, although the complaint alleged aiding and abetting illegal conduct, there were no specifics alleged that the defendants knowingly violated a state or federal statute applicable to the sale of firearms. A company does not aid and abet merely because it knows that some bad actors will take advantage of its products for criminal purposes. Now, that was kind of before we get to the second piece, John, that was kind of the crux of the case, where basically the Supreme Court said, there's no evidence at all. There's certainly no proof that any of these manufacturers aided and abetted.
Right. And I was always trying to wrap my head around this case from day one. Now, obviously, they circuit shopped this because they filed this in Massachusetts, and the First Circuit Court of Appeals is known to be hostile to the Second Amendment. But like you said, they're trying to make the claim that they aided and abetted. That's a very tough thing to try to prove there, especially since they've got nothing. I mean, how are you going to prove that they aided and abetted? Did you find some sort of an internal memo that said, "Dear cartel members, this is our new policy going forward"? I mean, that's no different than the auto industry aiding and abetting by, car assault or drunk driving or any other analog that you'd like to draw. It's absolutely patently absurd. And I wonder if this was a publicity stunt. I really do.
I mean, there was no there. I mean, it was really, I can't believe an attorney, can file this lawsuit, first off, but continued as far as they went. I mean, they almost hit the Supreme Court. Here's the second point he makes, which is really, it's almost, I'm kind of glad that some idiot attorney did this, because this piece that he points out, I think it's going to backfire again. The anti-gunners, it's going to backfire again against them. Here's what he writes. The argument that Smith & Wesson designed and sold, quote, military-style assault rifles, including AR pattern and AK pattern rifles, fell flat. Writing for a unanimous court, Justice Kagan, not exactly pro-Second Amendment, held, among other things, quote, but those products are both widely legal and bought by many ordinary consumers. Excuse me. The AR-15, of course, is the most popular rifle in the nation. So he points out the fact that when the Supreme Court does hear some kind of case, from some state somewhere that has to do with AR pattern or any kind of semi-auto, quote unquote assault weapons ban, the side urging Second Amendment protection can argue that Heller protects weapons typically possessed by law-abiding citizens for lawful purposes. And in this case, the Supreme Court recognizes that the AR-15 is the most popular rifle in the country. So the probable result, he writes, is obvious. So I think this backfired. It basically forced Kagan to go, yeah, this is the most common, semi-automatic type rifle in the nation, and actually wrote it in her decision, which is going to come back and going to be, used against her, I guess, for lack of a better term.
And this isn't the first time we've seen this from what we'll consider left of center justices. We've had this happen before, I believe, in a dissent. And granted, let's get on the record here that a dissent is not binding precedent, but it is still opinion of a Supreme Court justice. It's something that will get cited. It is something that will get used. And I think it was a very similar thing. Was it in the Cargill case where one of the left of center justices said a very, very similar thing? Yeah. So there's no denying that the so-called assault weapons are in common use. There's no denying that they're constitutionally protected. And I know a lot of people got really down on Snope and everything that went down with that and Ocean State Tactical. We just need to keep forging forward. A lot of people were very hopeful, but I think that there's a method to the madness, and we've got signals coming from the High Court that says we are going to be taking this hint within the next year or two. So I think if we just hold fast there, and we'll be able to go forward from here. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think even a decision. Let's say some kind of semi-automatic ban makes it to the Supreme Court, and there is a decision. Even first off, I would dollars to donuts. It's going to go in our favor. I just don't see a scenario where the Supreme Court, this Supreme Court, decides against us. But even if it's the weakest possible decision, I still think it's going to bury some of the arguments against semi-automatic rifles in the same way that Heller buried that whole "it's a collective right" thing. Back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, you heard all the time, well, it's a collective thing. They're talking about the collective. It's not an individual right. It's a collective right. You don't hear that anymore. That's done. The Supreme Court completely and totally ended that. And right. So I think even a worst case scenario, it's still going to be a major chip into their their mountain of BS that they throw at the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I think that, our friend David Hogg has like an old copy of an encyclopedia or something, because I think he recently said that it's a collective right, but I'm not really sure if we should take that as a fine authority. But you are correct. We've gotten rid of this collectivism attitude.
He's so extreme. He just got booted by the entire Democratic Party rejected him. That's how extreme and weird that little wiener is. I don't know if you heard. Yeah. Did you hear that? He was like they basically said, "Hey, we're going to redo the vote," and he said, "I'm not even going to pursue. I'm out." He's totally.
I'm not even going to try. At this point, would you be better off just resigning? I mean, just.
Which he did. Like he's gone. That's it. I mean, he screwed up so bad. Even Democrats can't stand that guy. Okay, so anyway, I thought that was interesting. It's an interesting case. Obviously, the protections for manufacturers, for firearms manufacturers, are in full effect in the United States, which I'm so happy about. I want to move on and show folks the video of you and the Attorney General. Do you want to give some background to that, and how did you end up on that call, and Tell us a little bit about this guy.
Actually, it's a miniature story here. So there's like a press notification goes out, I think, over the weekend. This is last week, and this is New Jersey's Attorney General. There's going to be a huge announcement, a multi-state announcement. We've got this announcement, so members of the press can apply to gain access to the stream. And what's very important here is they go out of their way to say credentialed members of the press. Now, I don't know if you remember me talking about this at AmCon at GRPC. I talked about this very concept of having to get a press credential because there are areas that, they say, hey, you need to have credentials in order to gain entry to press events. And a good friend of ours and a colleague of mine, Lee Williams, who I respect immeasurably, who I think Lee is top-notch guy. He's like, I totally disagree with that, brother. We shouldn't need credentials. And I'm not saying that we should have to have credentials. I'm just saying you should get one to cover yourself just in case. Well, this is one of those instances where I'm applying for, press access and I have a press credential. Well, we have another friend of ours, Joe Laporto, who writes for News 2A, and he applies for, entrance into the press event as well. And they said, well, where's your credentials and, what organizations you write for? So he says, I don't have press credentials, but here's my byline, which takes you to his body of work. And he's got a whole bunch of, scholarship that he's written and articles over at News 2A. They completely ghosted him. They did not reply to him. They did not give him a link. They did not give him a link to participate. I don't know how many members of the media were on their list. I think there was 3 of us. Maybe there was 3 people. I think one other person asked questions after me. But this was a Zoom, so I got to participate in the Zoom. At the end, I could hit the raise my hand button and say, oh, I'd like to talk to you. And this is the second time that I've gotten to talk with or interact with Platkin. The first time was at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and I went up to him and introduced myself to him, gave him my business card, and said, hey, we should get together sometime, you and I, and chat. I don't think he had a clue who I was at the time. But from the video, you can see he knows who I am now.
Yeah, he knows who you are now.
He definitely knows who I am. And this was them announcing the lawsuit that they're going after the U.S. government and Rare Breed Triggers over the forced reset trigger settlement. So this is a private settlement between the U.S. government and another party, and the Attorney General Platkin et al. Are going after that settlement. So I don't know how much of the tape you're going to roll, but I know there was 2 questions, but have at it.
I think we have both of your questions. By the way, the forced reset triggers, what is a forced reset trigger real quick?
So it's a trigger for a semi-automatic firearm that forces the trigger to reset prior to firing the next round. So it physically resets itself. And if you watch the footage of the actual forced reset trigger, I don't want to say similar to a bump stock because the mechanics are different, but if you look at the slow motion footage that Adam Kraut did, that was, I believe, ended up getting used in the Supreme Court brief. I think the justices did watch his video. Very similar to how that slow motion footage is. If you look at a forced reset trigger, when that trigger gets pulled, you can see it gets pulled and then it goes back forward, and then you got to pull it again in order to fire the next round. So they're contending it's a machine gun because if you apply more pressure constantly, that it'll continually fire, but the trigger itself physically resets.
That's why they didn't like it. Okay, so here's the 2 questions between you and the Attorney General of
New Jersey.
Here you go.
Question, raise your hand, we'll call on you. The next question is from John Petrolino of the Pen Patriot.
Yes, good morning, Attorney General. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I have two and a half questions, if you'll indulge me. The first question that I have is, per Bruen, I'm just curious, what is the historical analog from 1791 that says banning an FRT would be constitutional?
Hey, John, you don't get half questions, so you can do 2 questions. Second of all, you can read our brief, which is now public, and see all of our arguments. Third of all, as you know, courts have not conclusively said it has to be from 1791. There's an open legal debate about whether it's 1791 or the Reconstruction era. It's not really the point of this. The point of this is very simple. For decades, including post-Bruen, the federal government has considered machine gun conversion devices like forced reset triggers that convert firearms into automatic weapons that, as Attorney General said, has killed indiscriminately, including law enforcement officers, as machine guns. For a very simple reason, because we don't think, as a country, and consistent with the Second Amendment, that you have a right to own a firearm that is more lethal than the highest grade military machine guns. And so what the administration is doing here, not through a rulemaking, not through a statutory change, not through any type of legal action other than a private settlement agreement with private parties, they won't even tell us, or tell the public rather, who these machine guns will go back to. So could it be violent felons? Of course. Could it be domestic violence abusers? Of course. Could it be people who will sell to violent felons and domestic violence abusers? Of course. Want to put machine guns, 12,000 of them, into all of their hands. So we welcome the legal fight, but again, there isn't a single public safety expert in the country who is speaking honestly, who isn't bought and sold by the gun lobby, who would tell you that putting machine guns on streets save lives. Period.
Okay.
What's your second question?
Yep. Thank you for that, AG. The second one is in U.S. versus Cargill, they extensively covered, machine gun action, and that's settled precedent. And they made it clear that it has to do with the single function of the trigger. Doesn't an FRT require multiple functions of the trigger? It's not
No.
one single function.
No, it is one single function, and we lay this out in the brief. You pull the trigger back and hold it, and it will continuously fire. And I would note, and I'll just finish with this, and then we can move on. The attorney for the plaintiffs in Cargill, at oral argument, said the question would be much more complicated than bump stocks for force reset triggers. So by their own admission, this is a different legal issue. And again, one pull of the trigger, holds it down, fire 900 rounds a minute. If that's not a machine gun, I don't know what is. Michael, are there any other questions?
Okay, so first off, if that guy didn't experience dozens of wedgies during his high school and college days, then there's no justice in this country. That's number one. Number two, I mean, it's almost like we could play some kind of like drinking game over, how many things did this guy get factually incorrect?
I was just saying, I wanted to hit the space bar as you're playing this. I want to talk about this. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Perhaps my first and last exchange with the Attorney General of New Jersey. And I will put this out there that if I am not given access to future events with my press credentials, which I have, that I earned, I'm not going to say it's an all but a conclusion that there will be a legal fight, but I have a feeling there will be some attorneys sending at least some letters. So I wanted to get that out of the way because Joe didn't get to participate in this because apparently his First Amendment isn't as good as mine. And again, there was only, I think, 3 reporters that asked questions. So Platkin, you could see I think he was trying to, do like a mic drop moment after he was taking me behind the woodshed on the precedent, the analog of 1791. Very, kind of like, I told you. But I think you could see he clearly got irritated with my follow-up question. So I definitely started to live in his mind in at least that very short period of time. what's interesting is the conversation about 1791. That is the time of the founding that is being used as an analog most places. And
in other words, if there's a law in question, if there's a gun law in question, part of the criteria is, did this gun law exist in 1791 when the Second Amendment was written? Right? Is that did I explain that correctly?
Right, and it's an analog, right? So you'd have to get something similar to that regulation, and this very time is there are no similar analogs for machine gun bans at all. Like, I'm talking about 1934. National Firearms Act, that does not have any analogs, right? So there's no analogs for magazine capacity. The analogs that you might see are like just things dealing with certain rowdiness and regulations that we may not like, but there's going to be some regulations that are going to be found analogous of the time of the founding, but semi-auto bans, magazine bans, and I'll take it a step further, machine gun bans are not analogous to our time of the founding, and they had firearms that were highly sophisticated back then, so they can't even say that they didn't exist. And then also in Katana, they said that just because an arm wasn't imagined at the time of the founding doesn't mean that it's not protected by the Second Amendment. So I don't know what he's trying to do there, but and I'll take it one step further, is in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is what governs New Jersey. Now, mind you, this lawsuit was filed in Maryland, and I write about this actually at Shooting News Weekly. I covered this at Shooting News Weekly. It should be coming out over the weekend. Cam Edwards, he covered this at Bearing Arms, so you can see his coverage. But if you go over to Shooting News Weekly, it should be out by the time we're airing. And I talk a little bit about how maybe that's why they shopped Maryland instead of New Jersey, because if they got to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, per Lara says that it's 1791, and this is something that you and I kind of squared off on. And I'm not trying to call you out on the carpet, Michael, but I was like, hey man, this is what I found, this is what we've got, you tell me what you think. And I don't know, do you have a retort to me?
No, so what I was saying was that in the Raheny case, some of the decisions from some of the justices, in fact, specifically, I think it was Roberts, basically, he got a little wishy-washy. He gave a little bit, in my opinion, a little too much room, a little too much wiggle room when it comes to just how close the law has to be. How similar of an analog does the law have to be? And then what year they're even talking about, as far as, does it have to be 1791 on the dot, or does it have to be, in that general vicinity? But you pointed out what you just pointed out, and yeah, I totally see what you're saying. I totally get your point about Lara with the, it actually being 1791. I totally get it. I agree. I mean, I'm still worried. I'm always worried, though. I'm worried about what the Supreme Court justices are going to say. I'm worried about how they're going to, rule. I don't have faith in anyone other than Thomas, maybe Alito, but I just it's hard not to worry. But I think you're absolutely right. The date is 1791. Yeah.
Anything to deal with the Supreme Court, I'm going to give you an analog. This is me picturing my youngest roommate, who's 8 years old, coming with me to a fancy event, and we're both wearing white suits, and there's a lot of wine at this party, and it's going to be boring, and there's going to be no electronics. This is me worried about the Supreme Court. What they're going to do is me worrying going into an event that's like a borderline black tie affair, that who knows what's going to ensue because of just boredom and debauchery that a child might bring. And that's honestly, the fears that I have when it comes to the Supreme Court, you never know what's going to happen. You don't know how they're going to surprise you. And I mean that in a very sincere way. They might surprise us in a very meaningful way. And, start asking around about the bouquet of the wine, or, if it's dry enough for them and if it has a sousant of fruit. But you're also worrying about those magical moments where they knock over the tower of champagne, right? So that's kind of the way I look at this. It's like a party that could really go south quickly.
But what you're saying is totally accurate as far as, there were no magazine laws back then. There were no,
None.
full auto laws back then. But even if you take a step further back, even if you go from, higher level and you look down on it and say, hey, were there laws regulating, an arm that was only designed for military, or, this AG clown said something about, fully military grade, weapons, whatever.
Right.
The reality is, yes, the civilians or the militia were using arms that were used just for, or designed just for the military. But a step beyond that, the actual firearms that they were using just to hunt deer is arguably they were more lethal and more deadly and more capable than the arms that they were using to go to war with. I mean, they were basically what they were fighting with on the battlefield were like these smooth bore, almost shotguns where, when they would go and design a firearm for, for hunting deer, first off, by the way, it wasn't serialized, it wasn't registered. They didn't need any permission from the government to make it. They made it right in their, their blacksmith's backyard or whatever.
They made them lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah, and they had a further reach. They were far more accurate. A lot of them were rifled. They weren't smoothbore. I mean, the arms that they were hanging on their wall to go hunting with were far better, far more capable than the military grade arms that they were using against the redcoats. So I mean, like nothing this guy said was accurate. There wasn't a single point that this guy made that was rational or true or made any kind of sense he clearly doesn't understand the subject in any way.
None. And one more point on this, they try to make an analogy that there was magazine bans because the magazines, which is where they used to store the gunpowder, there were fire regulations because storing lots of black powder was an explosive hazard. So we're talking about two different things. If it's not a hazard, then that's completely not applicable. But they are grasping at everything to find analogies up to and including laws that were going on in New Jersey that kept freed slaves from hunting in the woods on Sundays unless they have their owner's, permission, and some crazy law like that. That's the kind of analogies that they've pulled into some really old racist laws. That's why they want it to be Reformation era, so they can cite all the racist stuff that they did back then to keep black people from being armed. And that's New Jersey right there. That what you just saw when you think about New Jersey and the legal system, the Matthew Platkin, the guy that was just talking to us, that's what I want you to picture with Mike's atomic wedgie, superimposed in the background.
Yeah, man, that guy sucks. God, that guy's horrible.
I got in his head. You can't say that I wasn't living in his head.
You did a great job. You did a wonderful job. Okay, speaking of New Jersey, this is pretty interesting. I wanted you to talk a little bit about this. The Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, which is a fantastic organization. There was just an article. I want you to give me some context, lay the groundwork, and then tell us where we are with this. So they urge a New Jersey town to pass carry permit fee rebate or a fee rebate program. So in other words, it looks like they were overcharging, and now they're being forced to make people whole because they were overcharging for a permit that, by the way, this isn't just a carry permit. Oh, is it a carry permit, or is it you can't even own a gun at all, right? Unless you get this permit.
No. So we'll flush this all out. So
all
let
right,
me
lay it on me.
let me quote a great philosopher, Charlie Cook. Uno momento. Okay, so here it is. Uno momento. You can own a firearm, you can own a pistol, a rifle, a shotgun, whole different set of paperwork. Firearms ID cards for shotguns and rifles, pistol purchaser permits for pistols. Then you have the permit to carry, which is what we're talking about now. As you know, the permit to carry only became in vogue in New Jersey circa 2022 after the Bruen decision. So New Jersey was one of, and then, you know, I want somebody to challenge me on this because I only know of 3 states, right? So New Jersey was one of 3 states where the Second Amendment was functionally completely gone prior to Bruen. And I say that because California had carry before Bruen in certain areas.
San Diego, it was as close to shall issue as you could get, thanks to the hard work of San Diego County gun owners. Wasn't great. It wasn't great, but you know.
No. New York State, functionally, they had people with carry permits. People were getting carry permits in New York State. Massachusetts, 90% of the state was actually shall issue. It's only that small 10%, the Worcester, Springfield, Boston areas, and a couple of other hamlets within the Commonwealth where they created issues. But New Jersey, Hawaii, and Maryland are 3 states that had 0 carry prior to Bruen. And then the only thing that somebody came up to me with was, well, what about Illinois? I'm like, Illinois had carry for 10 years before the Bruen decision because they got taken to the, you know, to the mattresses and or the carpet, I should say. Everyone went to the mattresses, they got taken to the carpet. I think that's how that goes down, right? So Illinois, they conceded defeat. New Jersey, Maryland, Hawaii, 0 Second Amendment because we didn't have carry, and it completely killed the culture of firearms in these states. And that's my hypothesis about the culture. Now, that being said, they changed the law in New Jersey. It used to be, I think, $25. It was cheap. I think it was like a couple of bucks, really, to get a permit to carry in New Jersey prior to Bruen. Well, they changed the law. And when the law changed, they made it so that there's a $50 fee. So how much does the permit to carry cost? I hear you ask me, Michael, right? You asked me that question. I'm going to give you the answer. Yeah, it's $200, right? Just like what Charlie Cook was talking about on your show a couple of, you know, I guess a month and a half ago or so. $200 to just for the permitting, the actual permit. 50 of that goes to the state coffers, but interestingly enough, $150 goes to the municipality. So these municipalities have just been collecting these fees and the, you know, whatever, like with no thought behind it. Well, this one town in particular was looking at the statute. They were looking at the whole thing and they said, hey, you know, this is Daniel Francisco is the mayor of Englishtown. And I think you guys, you're probably going to have him on the show. I think you got to hear it from him. I'm going to hook you guys up with Daniel because Daniel's got a good perspective on this, obviously, because this was his town and him, and it was his plan. But they looked at
he's
this.
The mayor. He's the mayor.
He's the mayor.
Daniel Francisco from Englishtown?
Englishtown, New Jersey, right?
Wow, that's a Daniel Francisco from Englishtown. That sounds like a Cat Stevens lyric or something. Like that's amazing. I can't wait to meet the guy.
Yeah, no, and he's a great guy. He's Francisco versus Cook. He was a plaintiff. He was the first Monmouth County permit to carry that was issued in Monmouth County post Bruen because he was suing. His rider on his permit to carry became the basis and foundation of the statute that was our Bruen carry killer law. So, and you know what? I'll let him talk to you about all that because it's a fascinating story, honestly, because he's a plaintiff in a bunch of other cases too, I think. Anyhow, so he sees this issue with the excessive fees, and he says, wait a second, this is money that goes back into the municipality. So they announced that they were going to do this measure. It was out on Twitter. It was on their, the sunshine statements and all that stuff. And they put it out there that they're going to change their municipal laws so that, you know, after you pay your $200 fee, if you're showing receipt that you paid your $150 and $50 fee or $200, the municipality will rebate you back the $150.
Wow.
They're saying this is, and they basically said this is an unconstitutional fee. So the Citizens Committee was highly supportive, and I think that's the release that you got, because I know there was like a whole bunch of information that went out about this. So Alan Gottlieb, the chairman of the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, when he caught wind of this, he wanted to support this measure tremendously. And I think, do you have sections of the letter there in front of you, or no? I don't think you do. Do you?
I just have the release here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he wrote this really great letter, supporting the measure. And I believe, from what I understand, that got circulated, and this was important in the passage of the resolution. And in addition to like that support and his position on this, you also had the New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate legal director, Joe Laporto. And Joe Laporto, he went there and gave an impassioned speech, also on behalf of New Jersey gun owners and on behalf of the syndicate members. And they were very pivotal as well, because there was other members of the New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate that went to Englishtown, Coalition of New Jersey Firearm Owners. We had a member from there, Jim Howard, who's a member of everything, including the Citizens Committee. And actually, let's call him out. Let's call him on the mattresses. Jim Howard, you're going to watch this. Are you a member of San Diego County Gun Owners? Michael, get back to me. Email me if you get a donation.
Right.
You had gun owners, though, all over the state, representing multiple organizations. And there was a very impassioned discussion. There's recordings out there on the internet. There's going to be some more high-quality recordings. But the end of the story is they passed this resolution saying that we're going to give this money back. And the analog, because we're into analogs, the analog that Francisco brought up during his testimony at the meeting was, if I were to tell you that you've got to pay me $150 every time that you want to come here and give me your opinion or express yourself, he said that would be the most unconstitutional law on the planet, period. End of story, full stop, And so he laid it out there. So this story about Englishtown, New Jersey, and them doing this is a tremendous boon for liberty and freedom in the Garden State.
Yeah,
and I think the New Jersey Firearms. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I know you got me like a bear running down a hill.
Yeah, because that $150, just to make clear, they basically said, okay, like you said, $200, 50 goes to the state, 150 goes to the municipality, but it was just sitting there. They weren't actually there was no cost. There was no $150 cost. They were just like, hey, just because we don't like people that carry guns, we're gonna charge this exorbitant amount. And there's a passage here from Gottlieb. Suffice it to say that the $200 fee that the Garden State imposes on its citizens qualifies for what the Supreme Court says is an exorbitant fee. Clearly, expecting applicants to pay that much to exercise a right is unconstitutional. So they basically say, hey, this isn't a fee. It's not like there's $150 worth of work that goes into this. You're just taxing people that want to bear arms, and oh, by the way, that happens to be an individual right, a natural one at that. So that's awesome. That's fantastic. So where is it at? Yeah. Is this happening, or what? How close are we?
So Francisco, at one point, to qualify something that you said in his testimony, he also said that he talked to the police, obviously about all of this. He said in his town, the police officer that handles permits dedicates at most a half an hour a month to doing this, because this is something that's already background checked by the state. Like, the state has already handled this. By the time it gets back to the municipality, the application is crisp, it's clear. These are people that have already been background checked. So he's like, this is just a rubber stamp for the police department to put on there. Why are they collecting $150 for no other reason than just to be obstructionist? So the current status is, if you're an Englishtown, New Jersey resident, and you've got a permit of carry that's been issued from, I think there's a time frame, maybe from January 1 of this year. I can't remember what the resolution exactly said. You could go back to your municipality with your receipt in Englishtown, and they will give you your $150 back. And I urge you to do that. And
Nice.
Our friends over at the syndicate, they did a good job on this. I asked them to make a map. I said, you have to make a map that's an interactive map that shows the municipalities that are jumping on board of this. And if you look at the map, it's a great big map. And in the middle of it, there's a very, very small, tiny spark, a very small municipality of Englishtown, New Jersey. It's a little green mark on their map that says that this is or a blue mark, whatever color it is. And that's the spark of liberty right there in the middle of New Jersey, in Monmouth County, New Jersey. That is going to be a new revolution. And you ask me what the status is, Michael. There's municipalities all over the state that have now gotten requests for this measure to happen. And I talked to Joe Laporto the other day, and he told me that people, because they were tweeting about this or posting on X while this was going on live, he said he was getting messages while he was still at the meeting after the resolution passed. How can we do this in our town? So they've got a whole packet at the New Jersey Firearms Owners Syndicate where you could get all the details on how to do this in your town in New Jersey. And of course, over at the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, ccrkba.org, you could read Alan Gottlieb's press releases. There's 2 press releases there. There's one where he was urging the town, and then there's another one with him celebrating the good job that the town did in passing this resolution. And this is one of the most beautiful things that I've seen out of the Garden State in years.
That's awesome. And it was an elected official who, you know, I mean, he could have kept all the money and used it to, have a bust of himself in a municipal park built, or something like that. Instead, he said, nope, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. John Petrolino, the Pen Patriot, always a pleasure. Where can people find your work?
You could find my work. I primarily write for Bearing Arms, but since I'm a freelance guy, I've got work at Bearing Arms, Ammo Land, The Truth About Guns, Shooting News Weekly, more so recently than the others. So article coming out soon at Shooting News Weekly. ThePenPatriot.com is the clearinghouse for everything John Petrolino. And I want to hear from you. If you've got comments, you've got suggestions, you've got love mail, you've got hate mail, and if you've got news tips, email me, john@thepenpatriot.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much, John. Awesome job. All right, there you go. Okay, now that you know and have heard all the bad stuff that's happening, you want to know what can you do to help. So we're going to do our deployment section, and that's brought to you by SageTree, sagetree.com. If you need your website rebuilt, if you want to get into digital marketing, if you want to reach out to the Second Amendment world, go to sagetree.com. If you have a website and no one's taken a look at it recently, or you had it built years ago and you want to see, hey, what can I do better? SageTree. Go to sagetree.com. San Diego County Gun Owners uses them. Gun Owners Radio uses them. They do a fantastic job. Can't thank them enough. Sagetree.com. Okay, so deployment, get involved. You got to get involved. We've just watched another week of ridiculous, horrible, stupid riots. And these marches and riots, and nothing ever gets done. That's not the way to move the ball in this, in politics. There really just isn't an example where a march or a demonstration or anything has ever really moved the ball forward in politics. But there are very, very, very few exceptions, like maybe Selma back in the 60s. But the reality is marches and protests and rallies, they don't do anything. In fact, a lot of them are counterproductive, especially if you're up in LA throwing rocks at law enforcement. They just don't get the job done. So what does get the job done? Well, what gets the job done is being involved in the system, getting people organized and raising money in order to get things done in public policy that you want to get done. And that's what the Second Amendment is. It's all about public policy. So let me give you some ways you can get more involved. First is the 2025 Gun Rights Policy Conference by Second Amendment Foundation. We've talked about this. Now's the time to start making. It's in September. It's free. You can register for free, but you got to start making like hotel and transportation plans right now because it's September 20th through September 28th. I will be there. I'm very much looking forward to it. Alicia, you're going to be there.
I'll be there.
We're going to have a whole lot of fun, so come and say hello to us if you can make it. We're actually going to go to the, what museum are we going to?
I don't.
The Browning Museum.
Browning,
Yeah, we're
okay.
going to the Browning Museum in Utah, and then Friday we're going to go to the, what is it, AmCon?
AmCon, yep.
AmCon, which has to do with media and everything, and then Saturday, Sunday is the actual Second Amendment Foundation Gun Rights Policy Conference. Advocacy through action. That is the theme. You're also going to get to meet Alan Gottlieb from Second Amendment Foundation, Adam Kraut from Second Amendment Foundation, Charlie Cook from Riding Shotgun with Charlie, and Jared Yanis from Guns and Gadgets. Well, I love Guns and Gadgets. I think that's one of the better Second Amendment based YouTube channels out there. I really like it. So there you go. That's one way. That's one way you can get more involved. The other one is tabletops and shooting socials. If you go to San Diego County Gun Owners website and you go to the volunteer section, we're going to give you a bunch of opportunities to get involved, to help us grow the organization, to help us get the message out. One of the things we definitely need is coming up. We have that gun show, which we talked to Ian about. There's going to be a gun show on June 21st and June 22nd. We want you to come help us work the booth, talk to folks. You know, it should be low-hanging fruit there in Escondido at a gun show. We should be able to tell people how to get their CCW or how to get more involved with San Diego County gun owners. You know, it should be a real successful thing for us. And then also Guns N' Moses, that's one of our shooting socials. That is the next day. It's on Sunday. If you have any desire to come and help, we do is we teach people who've never shot before how to shoot. Guns N' Moses is a group of Jewish folks who once a month they get about 15, 20 people together and we teach them how to shoot. Most of them have never touched a gun before. I got to tell you, it is the most fun and rewarding advocacy that you can do, teaching someone how to shoot. Anyway, if you've never worked a booth before, if you've never worked a tabletop before, if you've never worked a shooting social before, no problem. Just say, hey, I want to come and learn. You know, you'll never be alone. You know, we'll make sure that you're always with somebody and that you know what you're doing. If you just want to come and observe the first time, okay, great. We definitely need more people to participate. We see a lot of the same faces. You know, it's that 20-80 rule where, what is it, 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's honestly, these days, it's like 5% of the people do 95% of the work. So we really need you to step outside of your comfort zone in 2025 and help us get things done. Intro to Off-Grid Comms, July 26th. You going to that? You guys, have you taken that class?
I have not taken that class.
It looks kind of fascinating.
I haven't yet. I've bought all the stuff.
You bought all the
So
stuff?
I'm halfway there. I went into Cargo, and there at Cargo they have this really cool package that they put together, and I bought the package, so I've got all the stuff, and they even came with a really cool case to keep it all in. So I'm ready. Now I just need to learn how to use it.
All right. Well, tell them about the class.
Yeah. Well,
You got it? Okay.
I've got it.
All right, go ahead.
Right. So a lot of people have been asked if it's a ham radio class. It's not a ham radio class. It's actually a class that teaches how to communicate without cell service, without internet, and without satellite devices, using off-the-shelf tools that are affordable and that are commercially available. Ham radio is just one of the tools covered. No need to get your ham radio certification. This class will not help you to get your ham radio certification, although that's always highly encouraged. But you will be leaving with knowledge. You will know how to use the radios as part of communication in your tool belt. Sign up today. It's pretty awesome.
Fantastic.
It's July 26th.
July 26th, nothing but positive feedback from that class.
I know. I can't wait for you guys to schedule another one so I can go.
Yeah. Are we full yet on that one, Rich? No. Still plenty of...
Well, I can't make it because I'm going to be in Austin that weekend. Yeah. I wish I could come to this one, but...
What are you doing in Austin?
I'm on the advisory board for A Girl and a Gun headquarters, and so we have our annual board meeting that weekend.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, cool. You have to give us a recap on
I
all the non-top secret things you can tell us.
I will.
Okay, cool. Masada Yub is returning. The guy is a legend. He's coming back in September. We had him here a couple months ago in March. September 4th and 5th, he's going to do another live fire, which we got a lot of people saying, hey, I didn't get to do live fire. It was, limited. We could only accommodate like 20 people.
It's only so big.
Yeah. So here's your opportunity. September 4th and 5th is his live fire class. It's at Lemon Grove Rod and Gun Club, again, up in Alpine. September 6th and 7th is the Classroom. It's here in San Diego. We're going to get a location to be determined. Loved the Classroom. The Classroom went really, really well too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And live fire class is $620, which is a steal for this class. And then Classroom is $500 for the lecture. That's a 2-day lecture. Plus, we're going to have a dinner on September 3rd. Details to be finalized. Tickets are on sale now. So go to Gun Owners Radio, gunownersradio.com, and buy your tickets while they last. I swear, every year, or every time we have some kind of big event like this, people wait and it gets sold out, and then they're sad.
I know there were a lot of people that wanted the live fire class. Like, man, they're like, I waited a week until payday or what, whatever. And then I got in, went in there and it was sold out and they couldn't get in.
That's right.
Don't be that person.
Don't be sad. Don't be sad.
Don't be sad. Just buy a ticket today, right now.
So there you go. Save the date. Get involved. Be the solution. Wabayam. There you go. That's your deployment. That's what you can do to be a better Second Amendment person. Okay, our first guest is Ian Asher. He's from Gun TV. He's a promoter, and we have some really good news about an event that's coming to San Diego next weekend. So, Ian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Actually setting up at a show in Arizona right now, but I'm looking forward to coming back to California.
Fantastic. Now, what brings you back to San Diego?
That's a loaded question. We've done a lot of shows in the past where we didn't want to go back, but honestly, I love the people in Escondido. I love the people in San Diego, and so we spent the last 7 or 8 months of trying to figure out how to come back, and that's what's bringing us back.
So you're a gun show, right? A gun show is coming up next week? What are the dates for the gun show in Escondido?
Yep. The show is the 20th and 1st or 21st and 22nd. It's next weekend. Friday set up, and then a Saturday, Sunday show, 9 to 5 on Saturday, 9 to 3 on Sunday.
Fantastic. And it's at the location. The venue is the Escondido, what's it called? Escondido Arts?
Center of the Arts. California Center of the Arts, Escondido.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. We're looking forward to having you come out and put on a gun show, and it should be very, very exciting. Anything in particular you want to highlight?
Yeah, there was a few hiccups last show. We took over late in the planning process, but this time it is 100% our show, our planning. So a few things that'll be different from the last time. Firearms and knives will be able to come through the facility. They will just have to be checked before you get to the door. But I know that was a hiccup and a hindrance to a lot of people last time, so we want to make that clear that you are more than welcome to bring those. This show is buy, sell, and trade. So it's not just where you come and explore. Come, spend your money, and make sure you and your family are well protected.
Well, fantastic. That sounds great. Congratulations. And you guys do gun shows all kinds of different places. You said you're setting up somewhere right now, right?
Yeah, we're in Glendale, Arizona this weekend, and we're on about 5 straight weekends of shows right now. We'll be in Huntington Beach, California the weekend after Escondido. So we stay busy traveling around.
That's awesome. And my understanding is your spots are sold out. So all your vendors it's a sold out show as far as vendors. So there's going to be a lot of different vendors for attendees to come and check out, and like you said, buy and put their fingerprints on and see all kinds of cool stuff, right?
Absolutely. And one thing we pride ourselves in as well is when we call ourselves a gun show, that's exactly what we are. I know a lot of people have gun shows where there's solar and there's barbecuing and there's walking sticks. Gun TV likes to do things Gun TV likes to do things very differently. Though we will have our beef jerky guy there. It'll just be one table. The other 230 plus tables will be full of firearms or firearm related objects.
That's awesome. That's fantastic news. Well, I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with beef jerky, my friend. You gotta.
They sell out on Saturday every show anyway, so obviously people like them being there.
Yeah. How can you not like a little beef jerky? All right, well, cool, man. What else would you like people to know about the gun show? It's Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Sunday, and again, I just want to stress over and over that if you've came to one in the past and it wasn't to your standard, give Gun TV another shot, because this one's done a little bit differently, and we have full reins to run a show how we normally would. They do extremely well in Arizona, and we think California will do great just as the same.
Well, we're looking forward. San Diego County Gun Owners has a booth there. We're looking forward to being there. I know there's a lot of really great vendors. I'm excited about what you have to say about folks being able to carry and folks being able to actually, see guns for sale and all local and state and federal applicable gun laws apply, of course, but you're going to actually have guns at the gun show. That sounds fantastic. Can people pre-purchase tickets or buy at the door?
No, we've ran into too many issues anytime we do pre-sales of scammers and stuff getting involved. So everything will be purchased at the door. You can start lining up at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning if you'd like. Those doors will open at 9 o'clock. We'll take your money there and let you have all the fun in the world.
Good. Well, I'm excited. And ammo, you got an ammo dealer?
That's where we have a handful of ammo dealers as well.
Good. That's always the question I get is there going to be ammo? Is there going to be ammo? And then you get like the first, I call them the Jawas, like the first 20 people in line are strictly there for ammo. That's their whole purpose in life. They usually have some kind of cart or wagon or wheelbarrow or something, and they're just there. I don't want to talk about anything else. They want to get right to the ammo and get their ammo and get the heck out of there.
Yep. We'll have a lot of ammo. We'll have a handful of guns. And like you said, we'll follow all the California compliant rules that we have to, which limits some things, but I can still assure you it's going to be a great show.
Well, I look forward to it. I have no doubt it's going to be a great show, and we're looking forward to it. And so where should people go for more information? I know we're going to put out some information, so if you're getting our email, in fact, it was in the last email. It was in San Diego County Gun Owners email. I'm going to put it up on social media, but where else should people go if they want more information?
If you can swing over to GunTV. Make sure you do that either way, though, because you can get yourself a $2 coupon on our website as well and save you some money at the door.
There you go. So go to guntvshows.com. You can download a $2 coupon, $2 off a coupon, and then all purchases for tickets are at the door.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, great. Well, Ian, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to it. And good luck. Maybe we'll have you back on to hear how it went. By the way, is this going to be? Are you looking at doing this with some regularity, or what's the thought so far?
In a perfect world, we will be there 2 to 3 times a year. I just had some hoops we had to jump through this last time, but everything got fine-tuned now, and it is looking very good. So as long as everything goes great, like we know it will next weekend, we will be back a handful of times each year.
Good. And I know I have a little insider information that if you want to meet the mayor of Escondido, Dane White, he'll be there Saturday morning. He's actually going to be there working the San Diego County Gun Owners booth. He is so pro Second Amendment. We're so proud that we helped him get elected in Escondido, and he's a big part of why there is a gun show in Escondido. Swing on by the San Diego County Gun Owners booth, shake his hand and say thanks. And, it's always kind of nice to, take a little selfie with an elected official who supports your Second Amendment rights. So check him out. So great. Ian, thank you very much. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, and I'll see you guys next weekend.
Okay, see you later. Okay, our next guest is Dwight from Seal One. Seal One, I don't know if you're familiar yet, but they have been a sponsor of ours for a while. And Dwight has been a member of San Diego County Gun Owners for a while. So Seal One, seal1.com, check them out. Here's a quick tip to save you some time and money and headache when you're cleaning. Ditch the 3-step system and switch to Seal One. It's the all-in-one CLP that actually works. Wipe it off, and boom, you're good to go. It cleans and lubricates all in one. There's no greasy mess. There's no extra bottles. It's a dry loop, so you don't have to leave it sitting. You can wipe it completely off, and you're good to go. One product, one step, total confidence. That's Seal One, and that is Dwight. Seal One and done. Dwight, thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. How about yourself?
Good. So tell us about your affiliation with Seal One. How did you how did you and Seal One get to meet each other?
Well, it was almost 15 years ago. Coming up July 5th will be the start of our 15th year in business. And I had a business partner. He has no longer with us, but he's actually the one that had developed the product. It was his formula. we had met and I was playing with the product. And when he came on, it was like, hey, I can sell you this product. And I was like, well, I don't want to buy it from you. If I'm going to be putting my name and all behind this, then I need to actually own it. And so we went into business together and for 10 years, and then he just wanted to move on. And so the formula belongs to Seal One. I did not develop it, but we make it, so I know the formula, everything about it. And it was actually his wife and him came up with the name Seal One, which I really did not want to use.
Really? Why not? Why didn't you want to use Seal One as the name?
Well, from probably the era that I came up in, I was a SEAL. I went through training in 1979, retired in 99. So, and I joined the Navy in 78. So a year and 10 days after I joined the Navy, I graduated from BUD/S. So I was fortunate that, I say fortunate that I never spent time as in the fleet except for boot camp and A school, and then on deployments as a SEAL or UDT as it was, because it was UDT SEAL teams and back when I first joined. And so it wasn't anything we really talked about.
It was definitely a lot more. It was a lot. SEALs have turned into movie stars and authors and heroes, and I got to tell you, I kind of like I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. I think that all the praise and accolades and stories and all that I think it's kind of cool. But I do remember, my dad was in the Navy and served with some SEALs in the 80s, and it was a different era in my memory. The SEALs that you met back then, I didn't talk about it at all. It was very, very quiet and hush hush, and you didn't really hear about it at all, except for that Charlie Sheen movie in like 90, I think it was 1990. Then all of a sudden people started talking about it, and then Rogue Warrior came out, and boom, it just exploded. But yeah. I remember it being very, very quiet, very, very silent.
And it was funny that the Charlie Sheen movie, scenes from that movie were all taken from, real actions that had happened. The golf course scene, that's happened numerous times, the guy driving over the bridge, jumping off, that's true, so, back then, most of the time it was, when we got hurt, it was usually, hey, the old adage, here, hold my beer and check this out, so, just so using the name SEAL One was just kind of, I had to chew on that for about a week.
Yeah.
And now the way our product works, the name makes sense because it's one product that you're putting on. So I like to say you put it on to clean your weapon or firearm. I was told not to use weapon because that sounds too military. So it was like, no, in the dealing with civilians, you have to say firearm. And so it was like, so you use one product to clean your firearm, or you put it on to clean your firearm, wipe it off to lubricate your firearm. And that's really all you need to do with the product. So it's one product, and it actually seals the firearm, which if you've ever come to seen us at a show or something and you've seen the Sigfish, which is my 226 that I acquired and I purchased in 1986. I keep it in an aquarium of water to show how the water just beads up, comes off of it. So I was like, okay, it's a play on words with the name SEAL one product, seals and protects your firearm. So I was, okay, I can go with the name and work with that.
Well, and it works really, really. I got to tell you, I'm like the laziest firearms owner. I hate cleaning firearms. It's weird. Once I get into it, once I get it all broken down, I kind of like it. But in general, I hate cleaning firearms. There are seriously times that I'll not go to the range, just because I don't want to have to clean my gun, which is really lazy. That's as lazy as it gets. And if you are lazy like me, SEAL One is perfect, because it's so easy to use. wipe it on, wipe it off, boom, boom, boom. There's, it cleans and it lubricates. It's all in one. I really, really like it. So it's been fantastic for me.
Well, same thing. It's kind of, I was always, as we were taught, we go to the range, we come back, we clean, and then you're turning in the firearms to be stored, and they're going to be clean. As they always said, well, you take care of your equipment will take care of you.
Yeah,
and
gosh, I've heard that a million times growing up. Yes.
Yeah.
Take care of your equipment, your equipment will take care of you.
Right, because it's the little things. It's not the big things that cause most of the problems. It's little things that just were looked over. And, so one thing with cleaning the firearms is you would, or not cleaning, you get the carbon buildup. And the carbon buildup is what creates the majority of malfunctions. And so that's one thing that's real nice about the Seal 1 CLP Plus is it does not let the carbon really harden and build up. POF, Patriot Ordnance Factory, they use our product in their builds. And they had a guy who was repping their firearm, and he went just over 2 years shooting 53,000 rounds without cleaning again. He got the firearm new from them, and then he cleaned it 3 times, went to the range, shot, cleaned. As I like to say, it's a clean shoot, clean shoot, clean shoot process for the Seal 1 to get in, remove whatever product's been on there before, and now we penetrate in. So it's like seasoning a cast iron skillet. And then, so that's the sealing of the firearm. And now the carbon has nothing to stick to. So he did over 53,000 rounds without cleaning, without a malfunction. And I would see him at different shows, and he would always come up to me, open up the dust cover and put his finger on the bolt, and carbon would just wipe right off. So I don't know of many other products that have done that, or firearms. I was just with a guy who had taken a BMC, and over 6 years, he was, without cleaning it up, did 10,000 rounds through it.
See, that's what I'm looking for. That's the kind of performance I'm looking for, that I don't have to clean it for at least 10,000 rounds. I know that's not what you recommend, but it definitely...
Well, I mean, I a great friend of mine, he teaches, and he always tells me, he goes, Dwight, love your product, and because of the way it works, he cleans at about 5,000 rounds, because he goes, I know I can get through, I'm not going to have any issues. And, so he'll go 5,000 rounds.
Nice.
And
you guys just came up with an aerosol spray too, right? Was that direct? And I know it's looks like it's a great replacement for WD-40. Was that the intent, or what was the catalyst for coming up with the aerosol type spray?
Well, we had an aerosol, but we were having issues, and with the, I don't know where that was actually coming from, but we ended up, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. The company that was doing the filling got bought out by a larger company, and then they dropped the smallest 20% of their customer base, because we just weren't getting enough for what they wanted. So they dropped us. We had to find another company to do the filling, and we went through and had a few different ones filling. And the company that's doing it for us now, it comes out great with no issues. And, that's because, like what you're saying, I always like to say that if with our product, you think of it as a 3-in-1 oil WD-40, because it does everything that those will do and more. It's nice. So, and the aerosol just really, helps that, so we're here in San Diego. So San Diego's right along the coast, and we're along the coast, and then you're out to the mountains and the desert. So we get all the weather here. And so think of, door locks, and everything. I still have a
Hinges
master.
and all that stuff.
Yes, yeah. I have a master lock that I was issued when I went into boot camp in '78, and it's still functioning because I put some of the Seal One product on there, and so I still use that lock.
Nice.
You know?
That's awesome. All
Yeah.
right. Well, Seal One, it's seal1.com. That's the best place to go and buy product. If they're not selling Seal One in your favorite gun shop, then ask them why. Highly recommend the product. Can't thank you enough, Dwight, for being a sponsor of the show and for being so active with San Diego County gun owners. I really, really appreciate all your support. Appreciate everything that you do. And thanks so much for taking some time and talking to us, Dwight.
Well, thanks. And I'd just like to say, I'd like to, for everybody listening, come in if you want to try it. Just use the code FNG and you'll get 15% off from seal1.com.
FNG. I love it. Okay. All right, Dwight. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon, man.
All right. Thanks. Good talking to you, Mike.
All right. Bye. All right, everybody. Time for your favorite segment, my favorite segment, everybody's favorite segment, Stump, my nephew. We found out a while ago that Sam, my nephew, is really good at gun trivia. So now if you write in and you send us a question for Sam, and again, first time he hears it is on the air, if you stump him, you're going to get a cool special prize. But even if you don't stump him, if we just use your question, you get a hat or a shirt and our, of course, thanks. This is brought to you by Seal One, seal1.com. Quick tip to save you money and headaches and time when you're cleaning your guns at the bench. Just use Seal One. You can ditch all the three-step systems and just switch over to Seal One. You rub it on, you rub it off, and boom, your gun is clean and lubricated. It's that easy. One and done with Seal One. Check them out. Go to seal1.com to buy their product, or go to your favorite gun store and say, hey, how come we're not carrying Seal One if they're not carrying Seal One? So, Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm well. How are you guys?
We're good. I think we're good. You ready for the question?
Sure, let's have it.
All right. So Sam Clapton from San Marcos asks, what very famous German pistol was driven out of their manufacturer's factory by the Soviet Union? And then there's a bonus question too. Where was that firearm made instead of Germany?
Sam Clapton from San Marcos. What very famous German pistol was driven out from their factory by the Soviet Union? Ooh,
Yes.
That's a tough one. Clearly, this would have been. Is he saying pistol manufacturer, or was it just one individual pistol?
It's a specific pistol from a manufacturer.
Yeah, the manufacturer was manufacturing a specific pistol
In Germany.
and then the Soviets.
The Soviets told him to knock it off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that pistol was
yeah,
still
that's a
made.
tricky
It was
one.
just made somewhere else.
So clearly this would have to have been in 1945 or shortly thereafter when the Allies were occupying Germany and the country was partitioned. Part of me wants to, well, no, I don't think that's the case. I will go with the safe bet, and I'll say
What's the safe?
There's more than one bet.
Yeah, well, it's the hamster wheel's spinning. I'm gonna say, yeah. Well, first of all, this is a really tough question. Sam Clapton from San Marcos, great job on this. You might get me, but I want to say that probably Walther had a factory that was in East Germany, and they were ordered to stop producing either the P-38 or the PP. But Walther had production in West Germany, as evidenced by the fact that production of those pistols and of the P1 continued after the war. But that, I don't know, part of me thinks that isn't it. It might have been just like Erfurt was making Lugers and the Soviets told them to knock it off. Because I know Erfurt was in East Germany, but I don't know if they were making Lugers that late. I know they made them during World War I, but I don't know if they made them during World War II. So I'm going to go with the first one. I'll say maybe Walther had a factory in what would become East Germany. That's probably not it, but I'll go with it.
That was it.
Although he's got the model wrong.
Yeah,
But
Yes.
the
Yeah,
manufacturer is correct.
Yes.
What model did you say?
I said either the P-30 or P.
So close.
So close. So even though PPK pistols all have the Walther name on them, most were actually not made by Walther. Walther initially produced PPK pistols at their factory in Zella Malis from 1931 to 1945. When this factory was overrun by the advancing Soviet army, Walther moved to a new factory in Ulm, West Germany, where they have remained since.
Yeah, they're still in Ulm.
However, under West German law at the time, German arms companies had to outsource the manufacturing of components for their firearms. So Walther outsourced PPK production to Mandarin from 1953 to the mid-1980s. These guns have the Walther name on them and are often marked as made in W, West Germany, but were actually French-made and assembled in West Germany. In 1978, the first American-made PPKs were produced by Ranger Manufacturing in Alabama and were distributed by Interarms. Smith and Wesson then took over production for Walther from 2002 until the mid-2010s.
Yeah, I don't know how familiar I am with a gun manufactured by the French. I'm glad they moved to Alabama. I'm a lot more comfortable with some Alabamians making my guns than I am the French. Always an opportunity to pick on the French.
I'll take half right, better than nothing. Interesting fact about the PPK, at least in the U.S., or I think it's a fun fact. For a long time, if you went to your local gun store, which, well, I don't know if I can say this authoritatively because I don't know if the PPKS was ever on the roster, but at least in free states, when we go to a gun store, we see Walther PPKSs for sale, marked PPK/S. And people sometimes wonder, well, what's the S stand for? And why is it different from just a PPK? And a lot of people only know the PPK because of James Bond, which I won't get into that right now. But there are some weird rules about importing firearms in the United States. There are a lot of weird rules about importing firearms into the United States. And there is specifically an import ban on some types of pistols that was passed in the 60s, intended to combat the deluge of so-called Saturday night specials that were coming into the United States, and unintentionally covered the Walther PPK. Because there's a points system, see, it can't be simple because it's the government. So there's a whole point system. There's a worksheet you can find online where it's like, you know, if it's this caliber, it's this many points. If it's this other caliber, it's worth this many points. Whether it's hammer fired or striker fired, I think is worth a certain number of points. But the PPK was too small. So what Walther did is they made it a little bit longer and called it the PPKS. And that was perfectly fine to import in the United States. Now, they can make PPKs domestically, which I think they're doing now. They're not illegal. They were just illegal to import because for some reason, whoever made the rules thinks that a gun is evil because of where it's made, despite being the exact same darn thing. I don't get it, but that's why the PPKS exists. It's to get around dumb import laws.
Isn't the caliber different as well?
PPKs were originally offered in 32 ACP or 380. I believe all of the PPKSs are in 380, but I'm not sure. I believe they are. All the ones I have seen are, and that would also make sense for importation because 32 ACP isn't worth as many points.
What does the S stand for?
I don't know.
Stuff.
I stumped you. Dang,
there
that'll
you
be
go.
next week's question, so I can stump you.
You know, I have to admit, I remember the point. I had to have been in my 20s, my late 20s. I remember discovering or learning that PPKs or Walthers were German. I always thought they were British because of James Bond.
Interesting.
I remember going,
You're probably not alone in that.
Yeah, I'll bet you I'm not alone in that. I'm not
well, okay, now I have to go on the James Bond rant. The original reason why he had a PPK back in the day was that at the time, that would have been one of the most practical choices for a European gentleman assassin. He needed something compact, first and foremost, and there weren't very many options in that market, but he needed something that was in a commonly available chambering. And so your options for small pistols in a commonly using ammunition that was really easy to find throughout Europe, in those days, it was basically, well, a PPK in 32 or not a whole lot of other options. He originally had a Beretta, but in one of I think the first James Bond movie, I think M tells him to get rid of it and orders him to use a PPK instead. In a really odd scene that compares 32 ACP to a brick through a plate glass window, which is kind of wacky because it was considered not very powerful even at the time. But it was a purely practical choice, giving James Bond a PPK in 32. But it evolved over time and became so closely associated with the character that now it's the complete opposite. It's a total style over substance thing. A practical gentleman assassin in Europe would be using something in 9mm, first of all, because the ammunition is easy to find. And second, he would be using something that's actually concealable by modern standards. Now, the PPK is small, sure, but it's kind of heavy for its size. It's a solid steel gun. And there are so many great choices in polymer-framed striker-fired handguns with better capacity in a more powerful chambering that is easier to find ammo for. But everyone knows James Bond as a guy with PPK, so
That's right.
he still has his PPK. I think Pierce Brosnan used a P99 for a while, but that was before my time, and I'm not a huge James Bond aficionado to begin with, so I might be wrong.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Although, he did switch from, I know he switched from, his watch originally was a Rolex Submariner, and he switched it to an Omega in the 90s or 2000s. So he's not, he's not above switching it up. Okay.
I'm a Casio man myself.
All right, now it's time for the Shoot You Straight segment, and that's brought to you by Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon, cargostores.com. Check them out. Go to their website. They have all kinds of cool stuff. Or if you're anywhere near San Diego, go to 423 Broadway in El Cajon. There are two enemies to your firearms, rust and the government. The good news is Cargo has your back on both fronts. As a proud sponsor, they're helping us fight to get more Pro 2A officials in office, and their rugged cases help you keep your firearms secure and protected. Built like a tank, Cargo cases are stackable, weatherproof, and ready for anything. Whether you're hitting the range or going off the grid, you want Cargo. And here's something just for our listeners. When you buy a Cargo case in-store at a Rugged Gear Outfitters, just mention Gun Owners Radio or San Diego County Gun Owners, and you'll get a free, what is it? Desiccant. That's right, a free desiccant pack to keep your gear bone dry and rust-free. Visit them at 423 El Cajon, California. Great products, great prices, and uncommonly good service. We also have Dakota's got a cool, you want to do a cool little demo real quick?
This is a cool little thing that we've got here. So this is the Ultra Sealed duffel bag with a zipper, and it comes in this super nifty, tiny little container. Keeps it nice and tightly packed. I think when I saw this, I literally thought, oh, perfect for backpacking. If you're a backpacker, it only weighs 2.82 ounces, so it's very lightweight, and it is a pretty large duffel bag when it's all opened up. Crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. But yeah, it's a pretty good sized bag here, and it folds up into that little pocket that stays attached into that little bag. So you could just, throw it in your trunk, have it in your center console, and if you need a bag on the go, it's ready for you.
There you go. You can get that at Cargo. Go to cargostores.com, right? Did I get the website right? Perfect. Thank you, Cargo. Awesome. Okay, of calibers, let's go into our straight shooter or shoot you straight segment. I wanted to go back over. So last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about some gun myths that are really being they're being continued by gun people, and one of them had to do with 5.56 ammo and how an AR is people poo-poo it, and say, hey, it's not a big caliber, it's not a high caliber. And then I made the point of saying that gun folks are trying to fool people, trying to fool anti-gunners into believing that an AR is not a serious round or not a destructive round or not a powerful round. Well, the comment section under the video just absolutely fell apart. Some of those folks in the comment section just didn't like anything I had to say about any of that and just absolutely lost their lunch. So I realized I didn't make my point strong enough. I didn't really explain exactly, we just kind of touched on it when I think that really required more explanation than I gave. So I went back and found a video of what I was talking about. Now this video is Jessie Duff, who she went by Jessie Duff back then. I forget. I think she's actually changed her name now. I forget her name now, but she's a competitive and she went on Fox News. I think it was the Sean Hannity show. The NRA sponsored it, and they basically shot a couple of different calibers. This was right after the Newtown massacre, which was absolutely horrific. I mean, as horrific as it gets. And the NRA was trying to, do a preemptive thing, because there was clearly another assault weapons ban that was going to be introduced. Here's what I just want to show you the video, then we're going to talk about it. So here's the video where she talks about an AR. She actually shoots a couple of different calibers, and this is what I was referring to, and I'll go into depth after you see the video.
There we go. That's the hunting rifle.
You were a little off on that last shot, but that's okay.
I know, I probably flinched just a little bit.
You were right. Okay.
The next gun I want to show you, the firearm, this is a Beretta 12-gauge shotgun, and it is a semi-automatic, just like the 30-06 and just like the AR-15. What I'm going to show you is two different shells. One is a slug and one is a waterfowl round. Now keep in mind, this is something that I use in competition as well. I shoot a Benelli M2 12-gauge semi-automatic, and it's good for hunting, recreational shooting, and also competitions like I do. So let me show you that real quick. As you can see, we have some different sizes in the calibers here. If you want, I can go down range and show these to you really quick. Now the thing I want to show you, the 223, the big, bad, scary rifle AR-15, this is the impact that the projectile made out of it. As you can see over here, we have the 30-06. It's obviously a lot bigger than the AR-15. The slug is a lot bigger than the 30-06, bigger than the AR-15. And then last are this pattern. I mean, you can see the difference. So what I wanted to show you was that this is the least of your worries out of everything that I fired today, and this is what they're trying to ban. So everything here.
But the last gun you fired
impact.
was not mentioned in the ban.
I'm sorry?
Is the last gun that you mentioned was not mentioned in the ban, correct? The one that did the big damage.
Well, it is a semi-automatic.
Right.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
The
basically, I think we got what we needed from the clip.
And this is the damage.
So in this clip, what she's doing is she went and shot, keep it up there, 223 or 5.56, 30-06, and then shotgun, slug, whatever, AC, or 45. And her whole argument, and this wasn't the only time this argument was made. This was made a lot in the 90s, in the 2000s, and the 2010s. And it's still made occasionally today, although I admit not nearly as common, is look at the size of the hole of a 223 compared to the size of a hole of a 30-06. Meh, it's barely anything at all. And that's just not true. That a 5.56 is barely anything or nothing that you should worry about. I mean, the way she completely and totally played it off, that's not fooling anybody. I mean, no one wants to get shot by a 5.56. Nobody. It's extremely destructive. And somebody in the comments section brought up that, it was meant to injure people, not kill them. There's nothing that supports that. There's absolutely nothing that supports that. That's not historic fact in any way. That's another myth that's brought up by this thing. I think we should completely stop trying to convince the other side that because the 5.56 hole is smaller than your grandfather's 30-06, that it's somehow, barely, more powerful than a BB gun. It's not working. Now, you may ask, well, Mike, how do you know it's not working? Maybe it is working. Well, number one, they haven't stopped going after an AR, and this was 10, 12, 15 years ago, something like that. But then also I found an article. There's a website that's fairly popular and pretty left-leaning, Salon.com. Salon actually had an article. This was years ago. It was right after this, the NRA did this presentation. And it was 8 ridiculous NRA defenses of the AR-15. And they list off 8. But right here, number 2, the NRA put on demonstrations of the AR-15 that downplayed the weapon's capabilities by highlighting how small, or how it makes smaller bullet holes than some other guns. In 2013, the NRA held 2 AR-15 demonstrations at the shooting range it has at its national headquarters, one for Fox News on Hannity and one for its own media outlet called NRA News. Each demonstration dishonestly highlighted the small bullet hole the weapon makes compared to some other guns in order to downplay the weapon's lethality. In fact, the AR-15 inflicts grievous harm on human bodies, even in comparison to other commonly owned firearms. We shouldn't shy away from the fact that an AR-15 is a powerful and capable self-defense weapon. We're not fooling anybody, and we're not really doing it any favors.
Really, what I think it's doing is it's trying to show something shiny over here. Like, this isn't so bad. Look over here. But what we're running the risk of is, are they going to start going after those now?
Yeah, right. Right. Well, are they going to start banning your grandfather's
30-06? It makes a bigger hole. Yeah. I mean, if you're arguing it's not as dangerous because it has a smaller hole, or are you trying to push them to go somewhere else?
Yeah, and I just don't want to shy away from lethality. These are lethal weapons. We should be using them. These are the exact weapons we should be using. As Americans, we have the right to keep and bear these exact type of arms. It belittles us and it belittles our argument. We say, look at this little tiny hole. It barely has any power at all. It's simply not true.
Right.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it the other day, and you're kind of, hitting it home a little bit more today. But the other side understands how ridiculous some of these arguments are. The other side, they may be very uneducated in a lot of ways, and the famous quote about blowing out a lung or whatever. There's obviously some misunderstandings there, but I think they look for fallacies in our arguments just like we look for fallacies in theirs. This, Second Amendment supporters, we could do our best to make sure that the information that we're putting out there is accurate and logical, so that it's more difficult for the other side to argue some of those points.
Well, yes, it's a lethal round. Yes, it's a powerful round. Yes, we have the right to own it. Mm-hmm. And no, we're not going to stop fighting for that right to keep and bear, whatever arms we feel are necessary for our self-defense. So, all right, I think we've covered it thoroughly, but I wanted to show evidence. I wanted to show evidence that, hey, yes, people have been the biggest pro-Second Amendment organization in the world actually tried to make the case that, hey, it's a tiny little hole. So therefore, we shouldn't worry about it, and no one's buying it. So, okay. So one of the things that happened this past week, which was pretty fascinating, in fact, it just happened like just a few days ago, is California's Senator Alex Padilla got himself introduced to the pavement by federal agents. And I got to tell you, unbelievable times we live in. And there's this narrative that he's trying to project, and that he's getting a lot of support, like the ACLU, the Democratic Party, Senator Booker, all these different Democrats have stepped up to basically say, gee, look at what Trump is doing. Trump is arresting a senator simply for asking a question. And none of that's true. He wasn't even arrested, number one. Number two,
he wasn't just asking a question.
He wasn't just asking a question.
No.
So let's show that first video. This is the statement that
and so I began. I will say this: if this is how this administration responds to a senator with a question, if this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing to farm workers, to cooks, to day laborers out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California.
Pause it so we can actually see it. Okay, now, first off, he's such a victim. Oh my gosh. Oh goodness. Whatever have they done to him? But I'll bet if you see that and that's all you see, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what's going on?
100%.
The president is arresting senators. Okay, but before we switch away and I show you the video of actually what happened and not the lies that he's telling.
Of his question?
Yeah, of his. Right. Look at how he's dressed right now. He's wearing a black jacket with no markings. That's not like an official, I'm a U.S. Senator jacket. He's not in a suit. He has no name tags, no name badges, nothing to indicate who he is at all. And this is the exact outfit he was wearing when all this went down. That's number one. So let's watch this next video. Is actually from the podium where the Secretary of, what's her name, Kristi Noem, Secretary of I'm totally blanking. Anyway, Kristi Noem was actually giving her speech, and you're going to see how he interrupted her from the angle of her giving a speech. So go ahead.
That this governor and that this mayor have placed on this country and what they have tried to insert into this city. So I want to say thank you to every single person that has been able to do this. Also, I want to talk specifically to the rioters and to the politicians in Los Angeles. I also want to talk about specifically how many of our ICE agents have been docked.
If you're watching the camera, focused on Kristi Noem, and she's talking, was she taking questions?
Nope.
You know, he barged into the room and starts basically trying to talk over her as if he is some kind of king. Okay. And now let's show exactly, and we're going to pause this next video a couple times. So this is from the angle of being behind this Alex Padilla character. First, you're going to see him. He barges into the room.
Hands up, hands up. I'm sending.
Okay, stop for a sec. Okay, he's got no security with him. He's got no entourage with him. He's got no staff with him. He's in there completely alone, dressed the way that we talked about earlier. There's nobody knows who he is. The other thing is that guy facing him right there, those 3 or 4 people surrounding him, that's federal security. Kristi Noem is actually giving a talk on how dangerous it is in LA and how law enforcement has been targeted and how the riots have happened in LA. That's the talk she's giving. And then some guy who doesn't identify himself, who's totally alone, who's dressed, you know, completely inconspicuously, he's not dressed like a U.S. senator, starts shouting and pushing and shoving his way. Security tries to contain him. At this point right here, any reasonable person, anybody who's not trying to do some kind of ridiculous political stunt, would put their hands up and say, hey, wait. You know, here's who I am. Let's step out in the hall. You know, I just want to ask a question. You know, I apologize for not identifying myself. Any reasonable person would realize that what they are doing is escalating the situation and that they're not going about it the proper way. So keep
Alex Padilla, I have questions for the secretary.
That's the first time he's even said his name. Alex Padilla is. They don't know who Alex Padilla is. They don't know if he is, in fact, Alex Padilla. All they know is they have a guy who's pushing towards the Secretary of Homeland Security, talking over her, you know, basically lunging at the podium. That's all they know.
Pushing past her security. That's concerning to any security person. Like, those guys are just trying to do their job of protecting the one speaking.
And I will say, a senator should know there's decorum and there's rules. There's ways to ask questions. There's ways to do that properly, and there's a time and appropriate place and way to do it. And he knew what to do, and he didn't do it.
And any security professional would look at what these guys did and say, yeah, that's right.
Yep.
It's not like, you know, it's not like he was standing there calmly asking a question and the Trump administration called down and said, hey, security, we want you to beat this guy up. Mm-hmm. That's completely ludicrous. All right, keep rolling here.
You're rotating on your...
No attempt for him to de-escalate at all. He's continuing to push and shove.
On the ground.
They still don't know who he is.
Hands on your back.
If you let my hands, go ahead, put behind my back.
One hand, lay flat, Other hand, sir.
They're completely professional. There's, you know, I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of siding with police officers. I've been very critical of police officers. I definitely don't like police officers. You know,
It's excessive force.
Excessive force. They didn't do any of that. They didn't do any of that. By the way, they let him go. And after Kristi Noem was done, she actually spent 15, 20 minutes talking to him. You know, and then he goes out and gives this horrible, dishonest press conference. And I just think it's ridiculous.
The fact that he almost cried in the press conference is so funny to me. Like, he really had to dig deep and work hard to try to conjure up fake tears about his supposed unjust experience here that looks completely justified to me.
Completely justified. The only weird extreme thing that happened in that series of videos was him barging into a press conference and lunging at you know, the Secretary of Homeland Security while she was talking about what a dangerous situation they were in. And the fact that like I said, there's organizations like the ACLU and the Democratic Party and some of these others, I can't believe they're coming to his defense. There's nothing to justify his behavior here. The guy, this is absolutely disgraceful, and everything he said in his press conference was a lie, or at least an exaggeration, and the whole thing was clearly a political stunt. There you go. To cap off, you know, an extremely weird week. All right. Anything else? Anybody else have anything to say about this, or shall we move on?
Good.
Yeah, I think we can move on.
So one of the other things that happened this week, of course, that everybody is familiar with, is that there were demonstrations in there were demonstrations in L.A.
Major cities all across the country.
L.A. Turned violent, and we all saw, video of cars burning and rocks being thrown and all kinds of stuff. And the LAPD actually came out with a statement and said, hey, we're overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed. Like, we can't control what's happening here. And so as a result, the President of the United States said, hey, we're bringing in the National Guard, which it takes a couple of days. You can't just snap your fingers and boom, 1,000 National Guards guys just, come out of the woodwork. Now, one of the really horrible parts is that Gavin Newsom claims that Trump didn't consult with him at all. Did you see that?
I did see that.
And then he showed a screenshot of him communicating with the governor. The governor looks all kinds of out of sorts. He doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
He looks like he is absolutely just, completely out of his mind, has no idea what to do. Doesn't know how to handle this at all, realizes the how big the situation is for his career, for people's safety, for the whole thing. But one thing I wanted to talk about was Posse Comitatus. Posse Comitatus, I've actually said before, is one of our greatest accomplishments as a country. And what it basically means is, and I'm paraphrasing, and this isn't an exact definition, but in essence what it means is that you can't use the military to be your law enforcement. And it came about just after the Civil War when the southern states said, wait a minute, we don't want a bunch of troops enforcing this law, or these new laws or whatever. We don't want to be an occupied territory. There needs to be a difference between the military and the police, which I think is a great American accomplishment. I'm sorry it came from the South and all the crap that they were trying to pull, but the reality is Posse Comitatus is a very good thing. I think it separates us from being a banana republic. Now, that being the case, there are some exceptions. There are some ways to use the military. They're not in L.A., to go house to house and arrest people. That's not what they're trying to do. But there is a presidential authority when it comes to the National Guard that's spelled out directly in the Constitution. It's actually in the Constitution that talks directly about the National Guard and how the president has the authority over it. So the president can deploy troops under the Insurrection Act to suppress rebellions, insurrections, or domestic violence that hinders law enforcement. That is under the the Insurrection Act. So not only is it spelled out on the Constitution that he is, of course, the commander-in-chief, but there is also the Insurrection Act. Congress, by the way, can even pass laws allowing the military involvement with some specific situations. So the idea that the National Guard only reports to, or was ever intended to only report to, a governor is completely and totally untrue. That's just not true. Non-law enforcement roles. So the military can provide support like logistics, training, and equipment to civilian authorities without directly enforcing laws. So he also sent in Marines, active duty Marines, and the idea that the Marines are going to do to assist law enforcement is completely and totally within his power. My understanding is that a lot of the role of what the Marines are going to be doing is protecting federal institutions, federal buildings. So that's Posse Comitatus. That's what Posse Comitatus is meant to do, is to separate the law enforcement from the military. And the authority in the Constitution is actually Article 2, Section 2. The President, as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, has authority over federal military forces, which can include the National Guard when federalized, which is exactly what he did. There's also Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which grants the President authority to call the National Guard into federal service for national emergencies, support of federal missions, and specific circumstances like counter-drug operations or responding to weapons of mass destruction. And then there's the National Emergency Act. So he was challenged by the state of California, and they said, hey, wait a minute, you don't have the authority to just take the National Guard away from the governor. And the first judge in the Ninth Circuit pointed to the 10th Amendment, which really doesn't apply in this situation because it is so directly addressed, not only in the Constitution, but in other acts like the Insurrection Act. So on appeal, just hours later, Trump won. But I wanted to go over that and talk a little bit about that and see what you guys thought about, the optics or the legalities, or, what are your thoughts on the National Guard in LA and using the Marine Corps in LA in this situation?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were going to. wasn't surprising to me that it escalated to that level. I think what's difficult and what makes this whole conversation hard is that it's hard to know what to believe because the mainstream media is not doing a good job covering this, honestly. Like, they are covering what they want to cover. There are different, like Citizen is an app that you can get that shows a lot more detail because it's people who are there recording on their phone and submitting it to the app. So you can go and watch footage from some of the, demonstrations happening in LA from someone who's there on the ground, and you see some violence happening in those videos, and the media is not taking those videos and showing them. So I think mainstream media in, one direction is saying, nothing to see here, folks. Everything's fine. Trump's overreacting. We don't need military presence here at all. And then you've got, some smaller news channels and some more, I would almost say like independent press who's showing videos of cars on fire and all sorts of things. And you're like, well, what do I believe? And if you're on Twitter, you're seeing, crazy things from both sides, crazy claims on both sides. And so it's hard to know as just a regular person who's not on the ground there, like, what does it actually look like in LA right now? And I think, the more access we have and the more transparency the government puts out there for the public, I think the better. And in a lot of ways, we see that the LAPD is not being transparent. They are kind of refusing to talk about how many arrests have been made and things like that. And it's just interesting to see, from a place who talks about transparency being important and keeping citizens in the know, there's not a lot of information really being given.
The other thing, one of the curses that law enforcement suffers from is, how can you prove you prevented something? So if there was this huge riot, that was happening, and then, the National Guard moves in, which basically is acting like a police force at that point. And then nothing escalated from there. You know what I mean? Then it kind of got tamped out, and there really hasn't been a riot since. Mm-hmm. One side's saying, hey, see, we told you, you don't need National Guard. Nothing's happening. Whereas the National Guard's going, well, yeah, we prevented it from happening. If you put a cop on a street corner and there's no crime, did they prevent it, or was there just no need for the cop to be there? And it's an unanswerable question.
I just have a bit of an issue with just the fundamental use of the military in this aspect, in that law enforcement capacity. I personally am not for it. I don't like it. I know that, I will say that as far as the National Guard goes, I will kind of from a somewhat inside perspective, for example, even putting them on the border, and like we've done, helping assist in that way. There's when you have two different organizations, for example, Border Patrol and National Guard, when you have up in LA law enforcement and military forces coming in, they don't train the same, they don't communicate the same. I will tell you, there's a lot of breakdown, there's a lot of issues, and it may not be as great as you think it could be. And it takes time for all those units to become cohesive and to work together. And to be honest, it tends to spin up and create more issues than it does to solve problems, at least from what I've seen.
I don't like the optics either, by the way.
I'm not a fan of it.
The National Guard, I'm totally comfortable with. What needed to happen happened, but then when they call up the Marine Corps, I don't think he did anything illegal or beyond his power or beyond the power that's given to him. You know what I mean? I don't think he did anything unethical, but I don't think that was a good idea. The optics of it and the way it made things more complicated rather than more safe, I don't think that was a good idea. I
agree. Help is needed up there. In my unprofessional, non-law enforcement, not military opinion, I will just say I would like to see them call out help and to get reinforcements from an organization that's more in alignment with the mission and the scope of what they're supposed to be doing.
Like maybe other local law enforcement agencies?
I feel that would be more appropriate, in my opinion.
Sam, you got a strong opinion on this?
No, I don't. This is the kind of thing where it's not that I'm not political. It's just that I don't want to make a statement that is going out all over the intertubes without having a full, complete picture of what's going on. And I don't think I'm in a position where I have enough information to do that.
We are absolutely running the risk. We don't know who said what, and that's point that Dakota tried to make was did make is that there just isn't a lot of real valuable information. I did want to talk about I did give some of the facts when it comes to Posse Comitatus and what the president can or can't do, and of course the rest of this is just opinion. with the best information that we have. I agree, Alicia. I don't like the optics of the Marine Corps being used, but I could easily be swayed if there was some kind of memo that came out and the National Guard pleaded for help from the Marine Corps. I mean, I get it. There's this, and then there's the underlying issue of the illegal aliens, what they're actually trying to do, which is deport illegal aliens. I really, truly read as much as I could about that, trying to figure out what it is. There doesn't seem to be any kind of change. There was no change in the law. There was no change in the process, there was no change other than the scope.
They're just pissed off the laws being enforced.
Exactly. It's just the scope. And when you ask people, I saw there's this narrative out there that, folks are saying, well, hey, Obama deported 2 million people during his presidency, and you guys didn't say anything. And there is this narrative that's starting that, oh, well, he gave them all due process, which means that they all went to court. None of that's true.
No, they were given a court date.
Not even, a lot of them weren't even there. I looked up 76% of the 2 million people that were deported. There was no court date. There was no court involved. The due process doesn't equal court date. There is a process that is due, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you get to go see a judge. And the idea that all of a sudden people care about this immigration issue or care about the process and procedure because it's under Trump, when really the only thing that's changed is scope, I think is just so disingenuous.
Well, what they had is they had a sanctuary city, and now those who don't have a desire to abide by that have federal power, and they're coming in and they're enforcing the law. That's it.
8 years under Obama, 4 years under Biden, they could have changed the law. They could have changed the process and procedure if they wanted. They did none of that. And now, it is what it is. Let's move on to the San Diego Police Department transitions to fully encrypted radio communications. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is just kind of an interesting local thing. So I'm going to read, actually, I think we have a little video clip to show? And then I'll read a little something about it too.
Beginning today, the San Diego Police Department transitioned its radio communications to fully encrypted channels, meaning they're no longer available to the public.
So essentially, this move falls in line with the 2020 mandate from the California Department of Justice to protect the personal information of all individuals. NBC7's Todd Strain explains how the move could impact public safety.
We're behind possible person and teen suspect motorhome on SeaWorld and the 5.
Scanners is how we hear things.
Paul Andrag is a freelance photojournalist.
It's the scanner. You respond to it, you get there, you cover the story, and then you show the people what's going on.
San Diego police scanners used to be available for the public to hear. As of this morning, they sound like this. SDPD scanners are now encrypted. No one outside of law enforcement can hear real-time information, updates, or location on emergency.
Yeah, so basically there was a mandate by the Department of Justice saying that there's a lot of public or private information that's being put out to the public via these police scanners, and there's a bunch of apps you can get on your phone to listen in and things like that. So I think the concept behind that is good, right? Maybe they're reading driver's license numbers over the scanner or whatever, right? Like there's just potential for people's personal information to get out there. But what I think a lot of people are upset about, and what is concerning, from the perspective of a citizen who lives in San Diego, is that there's not a robust, platform, I guess, in place for folks in San Diego to know what's going on in their neighborhood. So, for example, I had a police helicopter in my neighborhood recently talking, and I could not understand what it was saying. And the sheriff's department has a phone number you can text, and I'll read you the response I got. You have reached the San Diego County Sheriff's Office automated helicopter announcement system. If you have an emergency, call 911. There are currently no active announcements in the system as a helicopter is over my house.
I get that all the time when I use that.
If you can hear a sheriff's helicopter announcement, please check back again shortly. It can take a few minutes for the information to become available in the system. I tried about every 2 minutes for the next 20 minutes, and I got that message every single time. If you're going to, and let me say that when that was happening, I did go listen to the police scanner. That's how I found out what was going on in my neighborhood. There was an armed robbery 2 houses from me. So that information I would not have gotten if it wasn't for the scanner. And a lot of the apps like Citizen, and there's a bunch of different like safety apps out there that listen in on the scanners, and then they have, independent journalists and media and people who go down and try to take photos or take videos and figure out what's going on. So there's a Instagram channel called 619 News Media, and I have no opinion about whether or not they're a great channel, but they wrote an opinion piece about this that I thought had some good points. So after the quote unquote security upgrade, this opinion piece is saying it cuts off real-time information on things like shootings, stabbings, and crashes. Unless media pushes for answers or police feel the need to issue a press release, the public stays in the dark. Just this weekend, a teen was shot in Skyline. SDPD hasn't acknowledged it publicly, and we only found out because journalist Bill Paul of SD Slackers tracked the police helicopter on Flight Radar 24, which is an app that lets you see what aircraft are near you. He saw it circling Meadowbrook Apartments and noticed fire crews responding. So that's one example of, as a city who one of our 3 core values is transparency. That's one example of the police department not being transparent about something that transpired, and there's no media coverage of it because the media didn't know that had even happened because they didn't have access to the scanners. So now we're trusting SDPD essentially to determine what is important enough to share with the public. And SDPD's official statement says, don't forget we still have San Diego Police Dispatch Online, which is a tool that you can find at webapps.sandiego.gov/SDPD online. And the purpose of this tool, I think, is positive. I think the purpose of it is transparency, but I'll just kind of read through what is visible on here. All I can see is the call date and time. So there was a call 1 hour ago, so I'm looking at that one. Call type, all it says is prisoner in custody. Some other examples are special detail, suicide or suicide attempt, disturbing the peace, mental case. So just very, very vague. And then the only other information it gives you is the division, like the police division, and the neighborhood. So it's as broad as Central Division, Balboa Park neighborhood, Central Division, East Village neighborhood. Well, that's not helpful to me if I live in that neighborhood and I want to know, okay, where did the prisoner escape? Should I be worried about my block, or did that happen 3 miles away? So even though, SDPD is saying, look, we have this really transparent software that we use to make sure the public's aware of what's going on, it does not give the level of detail that somebody would want to know what level of danger they're in. And just one other point on that, which was made by Ginny LaRoe from the First Amendment Coalition. She says that prohibiting media from responding to breaking news events, including shootings and natural disasters, hurt public safety during those events. Journalists listen to police radio transmissions to plan their response to cover tragedies like active shooter situations, wildfires, avalanches, floods, traffic disruptions, and other calls. Radio traffic that has been available for decades helps newsrooms decide what kind of resources to deploy to these news events. It's an essential part of keeping the public informed, and it's why we are very alarmed to see this trend happening in California and elsewhere. I think about wildfires, flooding, avalanches, etc., where the press is the eyes and ears of the community and helps keep the community safe. We know the first responders are busy in the field trying to keep the people safe, so it's imperative that the press can listen for themselves to give that information to the broader public. So I think that's a great point. If you're on the scene of something, it's not your job as a law enforcement officer or firefighter or any of these first responders to educate the public. So if this isn't going to be something that, the public has access to, then I'd love to see SDPD put together a team that's their job, is making sure that the neighborhoods are informed about what's going on, and so that people can continue to get the information that I think should be their right to know, things that are going on in their neighborhood. We pay a pretty penny to have law enforcement protect us, and if we're not informed about things that are going on in our neighborhoods, we can't make the best decisions for ourselves and our families.
Do you think it's incompetence or malfeasance? And maybe those are strong terms, but do you think they just, all right, well, we just need to put together better technology? Or do you think they're going, we don't want them to know. We'd rather just keep this all quiet?
Well, this is coming from Sacramento. This is coming from the Department of Justice mandate, saying that pretty much the mandate essentially says you have to go encrypted, or you have to guarantee that private information isn't being made public. Well, kind of the only way to actually do that is encrypted channels. So I understand the concept of why that rule or that mandate was created back in 2020, but I also think that there are unintended consequences as part of that probably Sacramento didn't think about when they made that rule.
Interesting. All right, why don't we let's do one more thing. Let's do the sock on bat. I like this.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, how do you want to do this?
Let's show the video.
Sock on bat. You ready, Reg? For sock on bat?
So I keep getting the question, Sasha, why is there sock on your bat? Is it to clean up the blood? And the answer is no. So if you're hitting someone with the bat, they're going to try to grab at the bat. And then they're going to try to pull it away from you, right? So you put a sock on the bat, so when they grab onto it, you can just yank the bat away, and then they're left with the sock and you still have the bat. So it gives you a second chance to, continue doing what you have to do so they don't use the bat against you. That's why you put a sock on your bat.
First, I think we should commend her for being willing to do this in her pajamas, her strawberry pajamas. I think that, good for her.
I want to say first that nothing I'm going to say about this concept is a dig to that girl at all. I think she's thinking ahead. She's smart. She obviously has some, pre-planning in place for a home defense plan. I think that's all great. I do think it's not the best plan. I think we could get you a better plan, Sasha. If you want help getting a plan, we can help you.
You don't think a sock on bat is a good...
I don't think that's the best way. Yeah, I don't think so. My follow-up question is, how many socks do we have? Because how many times is the bad guy going to try to grab? Do we need different layers of socks so that you can have him try to grab the bat 3 or 4 or 5 times? Where's the line here?
Yeah, first an athletic one, then a little bit...
Ankle sock?
They get smaller.
Then like an ankle sock?
Yeah.
They get smaller each time. The first one's like an ankle sock. The next one's like a crew sock. The next one's like a knee-high,
Remember the little side? One of them was the very last one will be like the sock with the little ball at the end. Remember back in the 80s when girls were wearing one of those with kids? Man. My question is, do you think she was hanging out? Do you think she was in her pajamas and then was like, I have an idea for a video? Or do you think she thought of the idea for the video and then was like, I better put my pajamas on so I can really sell this thing? That's my question.
I think the pajamas were actually on. I don't think she did that just to stage the video, but
she was already pajammed.
I think so. Yeah.
It looks like she just woke up.
Yeah, I think
she woke up with this epiphany of, I'm going to share this with the world. Honestly, before I watched the video, I thought it was going to be about DNA.
About DNA?
Yeah. I thought it was, so I'm just reading sock, bat. I'm like, where could this be going? What's this about?
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, before I watched it, I'm like, because if you hit someone with, a sock is fabric, it's going to trap and hold, potentially more. I was like, what else could it be? And then I watched this, and I'm like, that's pretty funny.
I hope somebody's keeping an eye on Alicia. She's trying to get away with a murder.
I was going to say, How to Get Away with Murder. That's a good show.
Strawberry Pajamas is trying to defend her life. Yeah. What do you think, Sam? Do you have any bats with socks on them?
No, I do not own a baseball bat. I do, however, own a .357 revolver.
You put for a sock on.
I do not have a sock on that.
What about strawberry pajamas? Do you own a pair of those?
No, I'm not really a pajamas guy. See, it gets humid here in Virginia. Right, you want fewer layers on them.
All right, that's a lot of information.
I'm looking at this. I think those are flowers.
Oh, there are flowers that are strawberries?
No, peaches.
In all sincerity, we're poking fun of this poor girl. I think her heart's in the right place. Yeah. But I don't know where she lives, but you are sincerely looking to help her, right?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think, a girl will do almost anything except buy a gun, right? And I think
I went out and bought one all by myself.
Well, no, I know, and obviously me too, and there's lots of girls who will, but...
We just found out where your head's at as far as weaponry.
Yeah. So many of the comments on this video were literally girls saying, oh, what a great idea, I'll add a sock to my bat. And they're being sincere, and that's the thing that's concerning to me, I think, is that people who have... not in a mean way, but just people who have no business teaching self-defense tips or probably have never taken a martial arts class or don't have any real life data to pull from, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think Sasha has read, white papers about random acts of violence and home invasions and what home invasions typically look like and what tools home invaders usually have with a, home invasion with a person home, right? She hasn't done the research to have an actual good opinion, vetted opinion on this matter. So I think people see what appears to be a good idea on social media and they put it in their head that, oh yeah, if I put a sock on my bat and put my bat next to my front door, I am safe. But it's just the feeling of being safe. It's a fake feeling that you give yourself, this confidence that I could handle anything now, I'm safe. And I would argue it's actually making you less safe false belief that you are safe, I think, could make you do things or act in ways that you wouldn't otherwise act. We think about this sometimes when people start carrying a gun. It's like, well, don't let the gun make you brave. Still don't go stupid places with stupid people at stupid times, right? Still be smart about things. But it was sad to see all the comments really buying into this concept and thinking that that's a good home defense plan. And, you know, I don't agree.
You know, the other thing, we were talking about mindset earlier in the show. I don't know. I think it's easier. I think it'd be easier for me to shoot somebody than to hit somebody with a bat.
100%.
Hitting somebody with a bat is such a, I don't know, there's something. You know, the one thing, a firearm is the most effective self-defense tool ever invented. I've said that over and over. But there's also a kind of a detachment, you know, with a firearm where you're hitting somebody with a bat is a little bit more personal. You know what I mean?
But way more dangerous. If you're thinking about proximity to your bad guy, would I like to get my bad guy to stop when he's still 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 feet away from me? Or do I want to wait until he's within 2 feet of me to try to get him to stop? Like, the obvious answer is further the better, right? So I have a tool that can allow me to send a projectile to him so that I don't have to be that close to him.
15 feet away rather than 2 feet.
But 2 feet with the bat, and now we're fighting over the bat. It's not my bat anymore. It's our bat. And if he's strong enough to get it from me, it's his bat. Well, that's not good for me. Now he's got the bat, and I can't do anything about it. I mean, pepper spray, I think, is a better solution for somebody who doesn't want a gun. Much better solution because it doesn't require going hands-on.
At least gives you some distance.
Gives you some distance. You can do it from, you know, the palm pepper spray, the one I carry, goes like 10 to 12 feet pretty strongly. So I could,
The gel ones are really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones out there. And when we're thinking about, you know, distance, it's like, why would I want to get that close to my bad guy? And what if my bad guy has a knife or a gun or something else, or is just way stronger than me? Like,
hell, what if I'm in a hallway? You can't swing a bat in a hallway.
Even if I could swing a bat as hard as I possibly could into someone's like jaw, I'm like, could I really do like a one-punch knockout? I don't know. Like, a lot of guys, you know, big thick necks and stuff. It's like, I don't know if there is, you know, like a easy button with the bat thing. Like, maybe you could make somebody dizzy, or maybe you get lucky and knock them out, but a dude could punch me across the face and I would be out cold, like, instantly.
That scene in The Shining, you know, when he was backing up, or she was backing up with the bat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Sock on bat. All right. I think that's the show. I think we're going to end with sock on bat. The Pew Pew Crew. We want to talk about the Pew Pew Crew. Gun Owners Radio has a membership program we need you to be a part of. What you get? Well, you get behind the scenes content. You get members only content. You get exclusive perks. Like, for example, we just had Masada Ayub, who's coming into town, and the Pew Pew Crew got priority as far as buying tickets. So what you're going to help us do is, being a part of the Pew Pew Crew, is you're going to help us grow the show. You're going to help us get more Second Amendment supporters to watch the show so that we can get the message out, we can get more people involved, and we can restore our Second Amendment rights, preserve our Second Amendment rights, and have more freedom in our lifetime thanks to your support. So become a member of the Pew Pew Crew. All you do is visit our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/gunownersradio, and look for the join button. Become a member of the Pew Pew. Thank you guys so much. Thank everybody for listening. Alicia, awesome job. Dakota, thank you so much. And Sam, always appreciate your perspective, and you got another one right. I think you got half credit this week, but whatever, close enough. And then Rich on the board, thank you so much. Thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you, Seal One, John Dillon. Thank you to Cargo, and thank you to John Petrolino for spending some time with us. See you guys next week.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. And check out our website at gunownersradio.com.